Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1234 of the War News stream. And today we have massive news out of Moscow. Explosions are erupting near Moscow, striking critical sites today. We've also seen the U.S. Senate approve a $500 million worth of Ukraine aid today. And also, Russian cargo planes are landing in Tehran about in the afternoon hours of this evening as well. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been able to get significant developments from inside the Russian Federation and the Middle East over the course of the past 24 hours. We have been able to hear information that has confirmed that the Russian MiG factory inside the Moscow Oblast has been destroyed today by Ukrainian drone strikes. This factory was responsible for the production and manufacturing of all variants of the MiG-29 currently in service inside the Russian Air Force, and its loss will not only be damaging Russia's future abilities to manufacture MiG-29 aircraft, but it'll also be severely hindering their abilities to maintain and operate their current fleet of MiG-29 aircraft, including the MiG-29 SMT and the MiG-29 U-13s that are currently in service. Outside of that information, we have also been able to hear that there has been a major pipeline that has ruptured and exploded inside of Siberia, near to the area of the Ural mountain range today, resulting in a significant loss of vital fuel supplies and resources that the Russian Federation is currently counting on in the war, along with a large explosion in the city of Orsk. We have also been able to hear that Russian drones have been flying over the southern eastern region of Belarus, near to the city of Gomel, while at the same time, Ukrainian armed forces have been able to land some significant hits on the Russian forces today, holding the front line, with the Russian Federation now confirming the death of the commander of the 155th Naval Infantry Regiment, or Brigade, which is a elite Russian naval unit, or naval infantry unit, and their commander's death is quite a significant one. Not only that, but that commander was also responsible for the butchers at Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin at the very beginning of the war in 2022. Outside outside of that information, we have been able to confirm that another high-level Iranian official has been killed today in unknown circumstances, as his cause of death was not publicized by the Islamic Republic of Iran. A Russian IL-76 did land inside of Tehran today, while a United States RC-135 Rivet Joint aircraft has taken off and made its way towards to the region of western Yemen, most likely conducting reconnaissance operations for future U.S. strikes, which will be conducted in the region, tailing on the info that we got yesterday that several dozen Stratotankers have taken off and made their way into the west coast on their way to make it into the Middle East, once again reaffirming U.S. air presence within the region and future U.S. actions to be conducted against the Islamic Republic of Iran and its forces in the region, including the Yemeni Houthis, which are a force of the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have also been able to get armed forces news from Egypt and Turkey, with the Egyptians now announcing the deployment and use of a HQ-9B surface-to-air missile system provided by the People's Republic of China, as the Turks are now stating that they will be expanding their missile production to include every single facet of the missile's assembly to be made inside of Turkey, meaning that Turkish missile systems will be entirely self-sufficient, built inside of Turkey from beginning to finish. We have also been able to hear that the Republic of France has stated that the Russian Federation is their main threat, and we've also been able to hear that an Antonov 124 took off from the capital of Kyiv today and has landed inside of Germany to become a part of the Ukrainian airlift. We've also been able to hear in final news, in some bigger news that I forgot to mention here for a second, that the Congress, or the Senate more so, did approve $500 million worth of support for the state of Ukraine. And the Russians are going to be scrapping their only aircraft carrier. A little bit of a bombshell there. Forgot to throw that one in at the very start. But beyond that, we are going to be covering all of this news that we have here on day 1,234 of the news. Today is day 1234 of the global war news, and we're going to be covering this news as easy as ABC 123. But moving us on into the major breaking news that we have today, we have been able to hear inside the Moscow region, or specifically within the Moscow Oblast, south of the city of Moscow, that there has been a significant attack onto a Russian aircraft manufacturer responsible for the production and fielding of MiG-29 aircraft that have been used by the Russian Federation for decades. The MiG-29 is a fairly ubiquitous aircraft, at least in the modern post-Soviet world, as many people have most likely seen its very distinct profile, as it pretty much was one of the first, largely fourth-generation looking aircraft to be put into service inside of the Soviet Union, or outside of the Eastern world for the large part. This aircraft is still used quite heavily, as a matter of fact, by the Russian Federation, the state of Ukraine, the Republic of Belarus, and was even used by the Germans up until the late 2000s, when it was finally retired from German Luftwaffe service. But nevertheless, this aircraft is a fairly significant one, at least in Russia's ability to conduct air interdiction operations in Ukraine, and also in a conventional war with the Greater West. To really quickly try and show you all the exact variant that is currently heavily used in service by the Russian Air Force, this is the MiG-29 SMT. It is believed that there is over 130 to 150 operational airframes of the MiG-29 SMT variety that is currently in use with the Russian Air Force, and these aircraft, while not being able to conduct an air-to-ground role, much like the Su-34 or other highly modified Su-27 variants within the Su-27 aircraft family, the MiG-29 still holds an important role in the modern-day Russian Air Force, as it still is able to conduct those air interdiction or air superiority missions that are vital in the modern air fighting space. The issue with this, however, is that there is only one major factory. There are a bunch of smaller supporting factories, but there is only one major factory within the Moscow Oblast that's a part of the Migurevich company that produces the MiG-29s of all types, that is able to produce spare parts and additional airframes to keep these MiG-29s flying and in the skies as a part of the operational Russian Air Force. And that factory was directly hit and destroyed today over the course of several Ukrainian drone strikes, and we have a large amount of video and picture evidence confirming these strikes and the destruction of this plant just earlier today.
Wow, somebody is peeling out too.
Oh, right at the moment the explosion happened as well. Someone was absolutely peeling out, and the Ukrainians were peeling the roof off of the MiG Factory.
Короче, я сейчас проебал, я видел глазами уебок в стороне завода, такой уебок, прям пиздец, лютый уебок, вверх туда полетел. Блядь, там уебало прям попало, блядь. Во, второй, на нахуй, на нахуй. Ебать, я на крыше, блядь, я тебя, ты видел? Слушай, сейчас дойдем.
This is the most French-sounding Russian-speaking person I've ever heard in my life.
This guy actually sounds excited, like he might actually have a soul, which is a little shocking. Most of them sound like they're done with it. But here's a shortened, abbreviated version of the last clip of this very emotional Russian watching the MiG factory get hit.
Уебало прям попало, блядь. Во, второй! На нахуй! На нахуй!
And also, by the way, just to explain what he was actually saying, if there's anyone who cannot hear curse words, please make sure to cover their ears. But the guy was saying "na nahoy," which is pretty much it actually directly translates into English as "no bitch." Like that's what he was yelling after he saw the explosion. I'm not even kidding. Like that is the direct Russian translation.
Nice.
Nice. But moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see a little bit of drone hunting that was also being conducted near to the area as well, considering that drones, especially the ones that were used during Operation Spiderweb, were quite a damaging deal for the Russian Air Force. Well, you've seen that the Russian police are now inspecting any kind of vehicle with an enclosed covered back, like a tarpaulin cover, or for the larger part, any kind of a solid truck with a cargo bay in the rear is being inspected by the police pretty frequently at this point, especially around the Moscow Oblast. But getting us into some more clips of the aviation plant that was attacked, I'll also be getting y'all a little bit of information about the specific plant. On the night of July 11th, which was today, Ukrainian drones attacked the Lukovitsky aviation plant in the Moscow region, according to the General Staff of Ukraine, which was backed up by video evidence. A strike was carried out on the Shipanov Instrument Design Bureau, one of the key enterprises producing missiles for Russian SAMs as well. We were not able to get any video or picture evidence of that, but we were able to get video and picture evidence of the MiG factory itself getting hit, which is the Lukovitsky aviation plant. The Lukovitsky aviation plant, once again, is the one responsible for producing any of the MiG variants. And you can actually see here, funnily enough, in the picture that was used as a stock image for this news summary, that this was actually a fleet of MiGs that were being produced for the Indian Air Force, as they actually have the Indian Air Force's flash insignia on the back of the vertical stabilizers over there in the pictures. So this was actually an order being made for the Indian Air Force probably several years ago, before the war in Ukraine actually began, at least as far as this picture goes, to give you all a little bit of context behind it. It's not from today's events, and it's not even remotely close to a picture being taken in the present day. But the videos of the explosions that we did get are from today, and generally from what we are understanding, the factory has suffered a decent amount of damage. It does appear that at the moment, the factory will most likely be shut down for a while as the damage will be assessed, and if any of the significant tools or machining that's used to manufacture MiG-29s or spare parts was damaged inside the factory, we may see that some spare parts for the MiG-29 will start to be reduced in their availability, or at least the supply line for that availability will start to be significantly altered, and for that reason, we will start to see the Russian Federation will send the MiG-29s up less, because of the fact if anything breaks down on them, there may not be any spare parts available, at least for those specific machined parts that still have to be manufactured at the factory for these aircraft to be able to be kept operational. Even if the Russian Federation is not currently producing any new aircraft, these factories and their importance to the Russian war effort cannot be understated. The Russian Federation uses these factories, much like any other aviation industry around the world, to be able to manufacture spare parts for the aircraft that are flying. Think of it in this way. When you buy a car, everyone knows that when you buy a car, the expenses are not done there. You have to pay for every tank of gas that you burn. You have to pay to replace the tires, to have them rotated, to change the oil out, to have any repairs effected onto a car, including the cost of spare parts. And fighter jets are just like that. Fighter jets are very exorbitant, at least in terms of upkeep cost. And not only that, the spare parts required for these aircraft have to be specifically made in generally small batches annually to make sure that there's a decent flow of spare parts going into the Russian Air Force for wear and tear, usually with a very small margin of error. With that in mind, with this factory being knocked out, their supply line is going to be greatly affected. There's usually only about a 10% surplus or 20% surplus, from what we understand, in most of the Russian armed forces for spare parts for any vehicles or equipment that is being produced annually to keep their aircraft flying. So with this factory being destroyed, it is most likely getting rid, at least for this year, of that 10 to 20% margin of surplus that they had in terms of spare parts, and it's going to be knocking it down, maybe even into a deficit. So with that in mind, the Russian Air Force is most likely going to be making the decision to keep their MiG-29s with relatively low amounts of flight hours, at least for the next several weeks or months until the actual supply side situation is ironed out due to this change, and then they will start to see that either the MiG-29s start to fly a lot more, or if the supply side situation starts to become dire in terms of spare parts, they may actually ground the fleet for a while, or may actually decommission some MiG-29 squadrons to use their aircraft as pretty much spare parts aircraft to be able to cannibalize to keep other aircraft flying. We're not entirely sure which it will be at the moment, but the hit does appear to be incredibly significant, at least on the operability of the MiG-29s and the Russian Air Force for now. Outside of that news, we also were able to hear that there was a little bit of a big thing that happened today, or at least a big consideration that we're starting to hear circling around the Russian government. But before we get on into that one, because that takes us up into the very northern fringes of the Russian Federation, I do have to see, what are y'all thinking right now on the major campaign that the Russians are having to stop and search any trucks that are traveling through the Russian Federation in fear that they may be carrying Ukrainian drones? What are people thinking about that, Matthew, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so right now in Moscow, paranoia is running off the charts. The Russians have a bunch of checkpoints set up all over the major city of the capital of Moscow, and they're trying to search every box truck, every pickup truck they can, and they're looking for drones in the back because they're so paranoid and scared after Operation Spiderweb got kicked off by Ukraine, where the drones came out of these Connex boxes and started flying into their bases and destroying all their aircraft, which was quite sick if I do admit so myself. They're expecting apparently another attack, and they're really getting paranoid in the capital city. So what are your thoughts about that? 74% said Russia is expecting a second Ukrainian attack, while 13% said it seems like normal Moscow stuff, and 8% said Russia is using it as a military pretext. And I would say, without a doubt, Russia is expecting a second Ukrainian attack. It is coming up. I'm sure Ukraine would love to pull another one off, but now with security so high, it's going to be very hard to do that because they're expecting that exact attack to happen again. And this time, apparently, they're expecting it to happen in the capital inside of Moscow. Last time it was just on the air bases in various places in Russia. This time, they're expecting apparently some targets in Moscow are going to be hit, and that is quite a big shift right there. So the Russians are paranoid everywhere. They're doing this at the border checkpoints. They're doing it in major cities. So I'm with the 74%. I think they expect a second attack. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that in my personal opinion, I believe that they are expecting a second major attack by the Ukrainians. The fact that this attack was pulled off the first time flawlessly throughout the entirety of the country, destroying 35% of all operational strategic bombers, is showing that the Ukrainians have a very high incentive, even if the next attack fails, to try that sort of an operation again. The risk versus reward, as far as that equation goes, the reward is heavily outweighing any risk posed to SBU operatives at the moment. In the last attack, they cost the Russian Federation hundreds of billions of dollars, for the large part, in strategic bomber losses. It was somewhere in the ballpark of the high 100 billions, or even into the 200 billions. It was somewhere up in that ballpark, a very significant loss. And with that in mind, we are going to be understanding that well, actually, really quick correction there. It was in the tens of billions of dollars of losses. I just remembered that their aircraft aren't that valuable. I was going off of like a Western metric of value, and I was like, wait a minute, their strategic bombers are only a couple of $100 million a piece. It's like 160 to 200 million or so. They're fairly cheap, but beyond that, it was still tens of billions of dollars of losses, and not only that, aircraft that had been lost that cannot be replaced. The Russian Federation has tried to start up their assembly lines to produce new Tu-160s, but since the crippling sanctions at the beginning of the war, they haven't really been able to pull off that assembly line process successfully at all. So pretty much meaning that there's no new Tu-160s being produced. So any bombers lost right now are lost for good, at least as far as the Russians are concerned. So with that in mind, the Ukrainians know that if they hit them again, they're going to be losing more bombers that they cannot replenish. They're going to be gone for good. They are literally burned into the tarmac of history, pun intended, at least as far as it would be going for the Russian Air Force. So I have a feeling that the Russians are expecting a second attack, and if I was the Russians, I would be expecting a second attack as well. So I'd also have to go with the 75%. But you know something else, folks, that's actually going to be earth-shattering here soon, is that there is a little carrier, well, not really a little one, it's a fairly large one, but off in the northern regions of Murmansk, in the city of Murmansk, the home, mind you all, of the Russian Arctic Fleet. And the Arctic Fleet is one of the grandest fleets that's ever been seen to set sail. It has some of the greatest ships that you've ever seen. As a matter of fact, let me show y'all a little bit of the Arctic Fleet really quickly, or the Northern Fleet as it's called these days, to give y'all a little bit of an understanding what we're really talking about here. Look at these vessels. The Northern Fleet, or the Arctic Fleet of the Russian Federation, is world-renowned, world-class. Actually, as a matter of fact, let me show y'all some of the vessels that they currently have, which are their flagships. They actually have the Kirov-class battlecruisers. These are truly world-renowned. These are insane, actually, by the way. These are the only battle cruisers that exist in the world, mind you all. And as far as technologically speaking, they are still stuck in the late 70s for the most part, but they are still quite impressive. But what's even more impressive than the Kirov-class battle cruisers that are, the both of them that are in service at the moment inside of the Northern Fleet is the Kuznetsov-class aircraft carrier. And this requires a little talk of its own. The Kuznetsov-class aircraft carrier is the only aircraft carrier that was produced and fielded by the Soviet Union in the late 70s and the 80s. This aircraft carrier started to show that the Soviet Union was an incredibly modern country. With its angled flight deck design and forward-leading ramp, it clearly showed that the Russian Federation, or more so the Soviet Union, was beginning to enter a new and modern age, one where American air supremacy at sea, with the endless fleet of aircraft carriers that we had, was possibly going to be at risk, especially if the Soviet Union kept building up this force of Kuznetsov-class carriers that they had in service. However, there was some minor issues. For one, the engines have never worked. Two, it also is diesel-powered, which means it has a limited range. 3, it can only carry about 25 aircraft, as compared to a single Nimitz-class carrier, which can carry about 75. 4, the ship has had an issue with leaking its entire life. When it goes out to sea, it actually lets the sea into the ship, which is generally something that they're not supposed to be designed to do. That's what we call sinking. But it sinks slowly enough that they can pump the water out significantly enough, but still a bit of an issue. 5, it cannot produce its own power. Currently, the Admrial Kuznetsov, when put underway at sea, actually has to rely on a specialized tugboat, because I forgot to mention to all of y'all that this thing cannot actually sail under its own power. There's about a fleet of 5 to 6 tugboats that actually push it around the entire world whenever it's being used. So even though it's diesel-powered, it technically isn't really diesel-powered, it's more so tugboat-powered, because the tugs actually pull it around everywhere. But there is a specialized tugboat out of about the 5 that it has in its fleet that is an electrical production tugboat, and it has a special electrical cable that they're able to hook up to the front of the Kuznetsov, and it supplies the ship with power to be able to operate everything on board. If that tugboat ever happened to be destroyed, the Kuznetsov is immediately out without power and cannot operate. Also, one other significant issue is that the Kuznetsov has had so many problems that the Russians had to decide that they were going to bring this thing into dry dock and try and refit it. And the refitting process has been going on for a little bit of a while. It's been in rehaul since 2017. And so
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's 8 years later now, and there's been some issues with the refit, to say the least. Let me bring y'all to Murmansk really quickly and show y'all the current state of the Kuznetsov. This is what the Kuznetsov currently looks like right now as Russia's only operational aircraft carrier.
Yeah, I don't think it's operational anymore. I think that might be rusted over. You think they should invent their version of WD-40 at this point or something? They need some help.
It is desperate. It's a desperate situation. And if y'all do not know, a lot of y'all are probably thinking, 8 years to refit a single carrier? This sounds ridiculous. What could have gone wrong? There has been about 4 major fires that have burned through the vessel since its refits began in 2017, pretty much wiping away a lot of the work that has been done. And not only that, as the repair crews have been going through, we've been getting more and more reports coming out from the contractors that have been working on board this vessel that the situation with each and every room that is attempted to be refitted is starting to be revealed as a worse and worse situation. In fact, some contractors have even said that the aircraft carrier is in such a bad state because of its dereliction over its prior decades of service that it may as well be cheaper or easier for the Russians to scrap the vessel and build a new aircraft carrier from the ground up, no matter how expensive that is. Most contractors are saying that the Kuznetsov is a loss. And it's come out today that the Russian government is actually considering scrapping the Kuznetsov. So it
Oh
does.
no, like no way. They can't scrap it. I mean, come on, it's their only one. I mean, it's like nostalgic's sake. They can't get rid of that. Honestly, if you put a side by side, and I know they're a little bit different ships, but if you put this Admiral Kuznetsov next to that Iran drone carrier ship that they just came out with, I'm not sure which one would take the cake, to be perfectly honest with you, because they're both hideous, they're both janky, and I don't know, like the Axis powers of the modern day doesn't have a good navy.
They do not, and they certainly do not have a good carrier fleet. Even in this picture here, which funnily enough was taken back in the 90s, look at the amount of rust on this vessel. Like it's an insane amount of rust even back then. And of course, you all have to remember that this has been a sort of a thing that's been going on for decades, is the lack of repair and maintenance on this ship, along with every other ship in the Russian Navy. A lot of them are in really bad condition. But outside of that, to really quickly speak a little bit more about this, if Russia scraps this carrier, there is not another one in sight. And something that's actually a little bit funny for me to share with all of y'all is that Russia does not have the ability to build an aircraft carrier. What? You know, a lot of people are like, how the hell did they get one then? Well, it's a funny story. Back in the day, there's this really cool city, when the Soviet Union existed, that was called Odessa. And inside of Odessa, they were actually able to produce and build, not only in Odessa, but also in Mykolaiv, some of the largest ships that currently are used in the Russian Navy. But the problem is, as many of y'all know, that Odessa and Mykolaiv are not a part of Russia. They're a part of this other country that's called Ukraine. And considering that the Russians have been doing this crazy thing called dropping bombs on the Ukrainians for about 3.5 years, the Ukrainians aren't really that happy with the idea of building the Russians a new carrier. So at the moment, if the Russians scrap this carrier, they do not have an ability to actually get a new one. The only country that could provide them with a new one is the Chinese, and we're not entirely sure if the Chinese would provide them with a new carrier, or if even Russia has enough money at this point to even get a new carrier, because carriers are not cheap. A modern carrier costs several $billion. Somewhere in the ballpark for these classes of carriers, somewhere around $3.5 to $4.5 billion. A Nimitz class carrier can cost all the way up to about $7 billion, and a Gerald R. Ford class carrier is getting close to the $9 billion ballpark, so a fairly expensive carrier. But beyond that, it appears that the Russians are pretty much about to have to write off their Kuznetsov class carrier. Whether they wanted to or not, they're going to have to get rid of it most likely, because there's no way to refit it. It's been in refit for 8 years, and the situation is still as hopeless as it was when it went into refit in 2017. And so the Russians are about to technically become a nation that does not have an aircraft carrier. And that's a little bit shocking, because there are actually a lot of countries out there that you would not think would have an aircraft carrier, but they not only have one, they have several. India actually has 2 operational aircraft carriers right now. China has 3. I believe Japan technically has 1 operational aircraft carrier, but it's kind of an aircraft carrier LHD sort of a ship. The British have 2. The French have 1. The United States has about 11 in operation currently. And I think there are a couple of other countries that I'm forgetting as well. Let me go pull up the list of countries with aircraft carriers. I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting any. Let's see here. So, actually, I'm sorry, everyone. I actually was forgetting several, actually. We actually have a couple of countries to include on this list. Let me make sure to put them out there, because I want to remind you all that having an aircraft carrier is what is considered in the modern day to be a little bit important, at least for power projection abilities. If you don't have an aircraft carrier, you really don't have the ability to power project, at least in naval terms. So let me just list off all the countries that are going to have an aircraft carrier that the Russians will no longer have. Let's see, India, Japan, China, France, Britain, the United States. Oh, I forgot to mention that Italy and Spain also have aircraft carriers as well. I'm sure that that's not really the countries that y'all would expect would have an aircraft carrier. Also, there are a decent amount of countries that have LHDs, or helicopter carriers. Brazil. Y'all are not going to believe this one. This one's actually shocking. Algeria actually has their own LHD. I did not know that. Egypt also has a couple. Turkey has a few. Australia and Thailand, as well as South Korea, also have LHDs as well. And the Russians are not going to have any of that. They're not going to have a helicopter carrier, which is an LHD, or an aircraft carrier once they scrap this ship. And that is showing y'all how badly the Russians are off financially in the modern day, and also how bad off the rest of the Russian Navy is, at least currently. If they cannot afford to even refit an aircraft carrier, a singular aircraft carrier that already exists in their country, how much more money could they be putting into the rest of the Navy, which we already know is in really bad straits because of the example of the Moskva, which was a flagship cruiser that was the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. No joke, a literal flagship vessel that was attacked and destroyed with relative ease by the Ukrainians in the opening months of the war in Ukraine. And so it is showing us that the Russian Federation's Navy is in an incredibly dire strait at the moment. And not only that, the Russian Navy Naval Aviation Air Arm is soon to become obsolete with the decommissioning of this ship and the scrapping.
Also, you know what's even worse than that is there's not technically a list of requirements to be a major world power, but unofficially, if you don't have an aircraft carrier as a quote-unquote world power, then it kind of like really takes them down a few rungs on the level of being even close to being a world power, because like you mentioned, so many other people, so many other countries have aircraft carriers, not just one of them, but they have several of them. And the fact that Russia can't even keep one of them, I mean, Russia's really, like, even the propaganda can't back that one up. Like, if you don't even have an aircraft carrier and you have a very weak Navy, and also your entire, like, defense of your country relies on nuclear weapons, that's about as weak as a country can get without, you know, becoming a joke at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And what's even crazier, this is what's, like, just nuttier, honestly, is that Spain and Italy both have aircraft carriers. I'll be honest with y'all, that's actually slipped under my radar for a really long time. But here's the Cavour, which is one of Italy's aircraft carriers. They actually have apparently two of them. And they also have, in Spain, the Príncipe de Asturias here as well, which is also an aircraft carrier still in service. They aren't the most impressive aircraft carriers in the world, that's, you know, no doubt about that, but they're operational, which is something that could not be said for the Kuznetsov. So even Italy and Spain have more naval power projection abilities than the Russians do at the moment. That ought to be giving people, queuing in people into how bad off the Russian Navy really is. Because if they can't even like, it's not that they're trying to build a new carrier, they're trying to refit an old one that's been in service for decades. Shouldn't be that hard. It's easier to refit vessels than it is to build them brand new, and they can't even do that because they don't have the money, and the ship is already that bad off. So it's a little bit interesting with that, that's the case. But I have a feeling that if people pay attention to that quite well, that most people should understand that the Russian Navy is nothing to really be intimidated about at this point, because most ships are probably in a very dire condition. But still, a lot of people have been talking about the future dismissal and scrapping of the Admiral Kuznetsov carrier after several glorious decades of tugboat training service. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so now that the Russian Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier, if you can even call it that at this point, is possibly getting scrapped, and there's very strong indication that it is going to get scrapped, what are your thoughts about that? About 61% said good riddance to that clunker, while 15% said it's a travesty for historical value, and 16% said they probably won't scrap it for propaganda value. And I think it might get scrapped. The Russians need some money right now, and also they don't want to maintain a ship that's really falling apart at the seams, like that one's falling apart. So I would say they most likely will scrap it. And I say good riddance to the clunker. That thing was a piece of crap. Now, the one thing I will say is it was a meme machine. We are going to lose our unfortunately lose our meme machine here, which was this aircraft carrier that the Russians have. But other than meme value, I think it pretty much had no value whatsoever. And the Russians are now recognizing that, and they're going to just get rid of it altogether and just be aircraft carrierless, which is going to pretty much take them out of the running of even claiming they are a world power whatsoever. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, good riddance to the thing. It's absolutely a terrible carrier. Oh, by the way, if y'all actually want to see it before it went into refit, one of the few times it actually was under its own power, I'm going to show y'all a picture, and I'm going to let y'all know in advance, this is not photoshopped. The vessel actually doesn't run on diesel. That's a little bit too high-end for the Russians and the Soviets. It actually runs on something cheaper, which is pretty much parallel to burning crude oil in giant bonfires. It's called Marat, or something along those lines, but it's pretty much an almost non-refined crude oil that they burn. This is what the Kuznetsov actually looked like while it was under power.
Oh my God, it looks like it's I hate to use the term, but like a garbage scow or something. That thing looks tough. Look at all that pollution coming off of it, and all the, like, is that soot on the deck?
Yeah, it's soot on the deck. Like it's almost like
geez.
It's like a Victorian era liner nearly, with the amount of soot that it's burning. And this is one of the few times, mind you all, that the carrier was actually operational under its own power, because those engines actually ended up exploding and catching on fire many times, more times than could actually be counted at this point. And then eventually they just decided that it was so dangerous to run the engines that they shut off the main propulsion systems and only ran some of the emergency generators from time to time. But generally, its power was provided externally by a tugboat that was connected to it. Here's also another picture of the Kuznetsov when it was underway.
Jeez, man, that the amount of like rolling coal coming out of that thing right there. I think even rednecks would be proud of this right here if you could like rig up a diesel truck to like puff like that. Like this is incredible. I'm not even sure how it's able to look like that. That's wild.
So, do you want to hear a wild fact about the Kuznetsov? It's true.
Yes, hit me with it.
Okay, so the Kuznetsov, when it was able to operate under its own power, billowed out so much exhaust smoke from just running the engines that pilots actually could not get a clear view of the angled flight deck to be able to land safely. So what the Kuznetsov would have to do, because as you know, most aircraft carriers have to get up to their near maximum speed to be able to allow for the aircraft to land, because it gives them that extra little bit of wiggle room before they get to their stall speed. The Kuznetsov would have to ramp up to full speed, shut off the engine, and pretty much cut out most of the exhaust, and then pretty much just try and coast, and they would have to try and land the aircraft perfectly at that time. Otherwise, the aircraft carrier would be going too slow, and then the plane would be going too fast, and they couldn't properly catch the arresting wires at the back of the deck. It's an insane sort of a thing. Like, they had to literally run this thing like the ghetto carrier. Like, it would literally went around the world as a joke nearly its entire service life. And
did they ever consider like putting a, like, I don't know if this is the right term, but like a catalytic converter or something to catch some of the smog coming out of the top of it? Like, is there no filter on that whatsoever? Is it like a straight pipe ship or something?
It is
like, is there
straight pipes.
nothing like in between? It's literally straight pipe. It must be, because that is so much like smoke coming out of that seems to be completely unfiltered whatsoever. That's incredible. Actually, they've designed a ship with literally straight from the engine straight to the out exhaust. That's wild.
That's actually how most of them are designed, interestingly enough. It's just that on American ships that are actually powered by some sort of fuel, we don't burn almost straight crude. We burn something along the lines of diesel or some other form of marine engine fuel that burns a lot cleaner, and we also have some filters on board as well. But this is just absolutely insane. But it's not the only ship that did that. There was a lot of ships in the Soviet Navy that burned oil like that. But it's absolutely insane. It's just nuts to think that they designed something like this, and it was so backwards ass when they even designed it back in the 80s that it was almost useless from its outset. It's certainly useless now, and I see a lot of people trying to say, oh, they'll have to save it for the propaganda value, but there isn't really a lot of propaganda value coming from a money sink that hasn't left port in 8 years and is still being refit 8 years later. The ship's done for. That's just really the truth of it. Even if they wanted it to be a propaganda symbol, there's no way to make a propaganda symbol out of this thing. So it's going to end up being decommissioned. That is a promise. That isn't a surety. Also, by the way, I should show you all the Kirov class battle cruisers as well. These things are insane. These are actually nuclear powered, so they don't really have any kind of exhaust. But these things were nuts because the whole design behind them was that it was a giant missile cruiser. The entire front of the ship, if I can show this to you all here, is at one giant high caliber missile bay. So this thing goes up like a Roman candle if you manage to hit it right there at the amidships area, right in front of the superstructure. This thing is going to go up like you've never seen. But beyond that, this is what is currently the flagship of the Northern Fleet while the Kuznetsov has been out of service. But from this point on, once the Kuznetsov is retired, this technically is going to be Russia's most advanced and most powerful vessel in their navy. And this thing also looks like a clunker as well. In terms of its firepower back in the late Cold War, it was pretty impressive, but by modern naval standards, this thing is entirely outdated. It would not really stand a chance against most anything, and the Navy could just pick it off from a couple of hundred miles away with a decent amount of carrier operations being conducted against it. It only has so much ammo. It's going to run out of ammo eventually, and so we would be able to deal with this on our own time. But this will be the most advanced ship in the Russian Navy once the Kuznetsov is retired. But still, I say good riddance to the thing. It was a terrible ship in the first place. It poses no historic value of any type at all. Oh, hey, by the way, Matthew, right here in this picture, this was one of the pictures that they didn't really edit too well. You can actually see the supporting tugs out there in the distance, and I think that this red one right there is the one that actually provides the power to the Kuznetsov when they turn off the main engines.
That is crazy, honestly. Like, to have your like flagship aircraft carrier being dragged around by tugboats, that's an embarrassment. Like, they'd be better off to, like they're doing or thinking about, just scrap the thing, because it even looks more embarrassing to have the tugboats around.
Yeah, it's just pitiful. Let me see, like, I want to see really quickly if they just have these. Oh, look, here's one of the fires on the Kuznetsov during a refit, I think, like back in 2018. But let's see here. Oh, here's another picture of one of the fires to happen. These, by the way, have only happened within the last 8 years. All of these were taken in the same spot inside of Murmansk that they have been before. I'm trying to see, though, if I can find you all the pictures of the tugs actually connected to it. Because the Russians usually try and curate the imagery of the Kuznetsov a lot, so that way you don't see it. But every once in a while, you can see the supporting tugs in the foreground near to the carrier whenever they're taking these photo shoots, because they can't be too far away, because anything could break down at any moment, and then the vessel's adrift without any kind of support. So, oh, look at that. That's beautiful.
That is beautiful right there. I tell you what, Mother Nature loves Russia and their polluting ships.
You know, something else that's interesting, man, is that when they say that the Kuznetsov catches on fire in refit, it's actually true that it could either just be a test of the engines or a legitimate fire with the amount of smoke that the engines put off. Like, it's really hard to tell the difference. Honestly, the engines being on looks worse than the fires that we saw in the last pictures. But anyways, moving on from our Kuznetsov story here about it soon to be decommissioned, we are going to be moving on into some other major news that we have also been able to hear in Russia, as a large pipeline that supplies most of the gas into Western Russia has also exploded, at least from what we were able to hear today. It is reported that on the evening of July 10th, an explosion and large fire broke out in the city of Longapas, and it is noted that the damage is estimated at more than $1.3 million, and indirect losses could reach $76 million. Restoration will take about a month, and the damaged area is in a difficult or swampy area, which is very tough to reach. But it does appear that at the moment, the Russians have also lost a significant pipeline that's now also down for about a month as they try and effect repairs to it. And then if you thought Russia's day couldn't get any worse than this, there was also a major fire that broke out in Orsk. It appears that it is some sort of a mechanical plant that caught on fire. It may be saboteur activity. But here's the clip from Orsk.
6 пожарок, скоро поехал туда. Ну, второй час он вышел, думаю, смотрите, еще сильнее пошел. Ой.
The Russian lung is something to be studied. The way they can just walk through all this, like that person walking down the sidewalk, and also the constant smoking of Lucky Strike packs, like on the daily, like a few packs a day, plus the combustion from the fires here. I mean, these are some strong lungs in the Russian people.
You know, the Russians have really, really resilient lungs, or they're just really stupid. I have a feeling that it's probably the latter, not the former. I bet you if you looked at a Russian lung, that thing looks like a habitual smoker's lung, like it's like a tiny little black mass inside of their body. They probably can't even breathe out of it too well, because they inhale toxic fumes like there's no issue. Like, they don't even think about it. All of that black smoke right there, it's toxic. Breathing that in is not good for you.
I would assume probably not. They have the iron lung at this point.
Oh, man. You know, the Russians would probably think that that's pretty metal. Well, lung bleed. But that's the end of that clip, and it does appear that the Russians are in a little bit of a difficult time at the moment, with all of these calamities that have been hitting Western Russia, including the retirement of their poor little aircraft carrier. And it appears that some Western countries today have decided to start making some stronger statements against the Russians, with the French Minister of Defense today saying, the French Army Chief General Thierry Bouchard saying that Russia is France's main threat. I also got to say that the drip goes hard. The French know how to drip. Like, if you look at that uniform, you got to say, damn, they do be dripping. But beyond that, it does appear that the French are saying that Russia is France's main external threat. We've also been able to hear that an Antonov 124 that took off from Kyiv earlier today and was a big source of attention because it was the first non-military aircraft to take off from Kyiv in about 3.5 years, actually made its way safely to Germany and is going to become a part of the Ukrainian Strategic Airlift Wing that is currently operating between Western countries, helping to bring supplies closer to Ukraine and then allow it to cross over the border by land. But still, very neat to see that an Antonov 124 was able to make it out of Ukraine, and we can see a lot of people gathering around to take a look at the impressive aircraft. Pretty neat, though, overall, I gotta say. And speaking of this aircraft, y'all might actually be a little interested to know this as well. This aircraft was just next to the Miria, the Antonov 225, that was destroyed inside of this hangar here in the city of Hostomel during the Battle of Hostomel. It was actually in this hangar right here. right across from the Antonov 225 and survived the entire battle and Russian occupation that happened in this area. You can actually still see all of the Russian dugouts and the shells that landed at this base during the Battle of Hostomel. It's a pretty wild thing to think that it still survives to this day. And I think there may actually be some pictures, and there isn't. There's like a Mr. Beast ad right there. But beyond that, I was about to say there's got to be some pictures of the destroyed Antonov 225, but the Antonov 124 that we just saw that landed in Germany was right here inside of this hangar, right next to the Antonov 225. After the Russians retreated, that aircraft has stayed at this airport for years, and has ended up being really the only surviving flying Antonov aircraft that came out of Hostomel Airport as a result. It finally took off today and left from Ukraine and made it into Germany, which means that this is the closest surviving aircraft, at least in proximity, to the final days of the Antonov 225, which was destroyed in this hangar at the very beginning of the war in Ukraine, which is still a really unfortunate thing because everyone knows in the entire world about the Antonov 225. It was an impressive aircraft. It really was actually very impressive. This aircraft was actually designed to carry the Buran space shuttle, or the Soviet version of the space shuttle. You can actually see it here while it was in Soviet service, but way back in the day. But after this collapse of the Soviet Union and the retirement of the Buran program, the Ukrainians actually decided to refit the aircraft and use it entirely as a commercial heavy airlift aircraft. And it was the heaviest of its type in the world. It had the heaviest load limit out there on the planet, so it could literally carry anything and everything compared to the rest of the commercial aviation world. It was destroyed, but these Antonov 124s will carry on providing vital supplies and support to the state of Ukraine through their external international strategic airlift operations. But you know something else that's even more interesting to share with you all here about the area of Hostomel is that during the Battle of Hostomel, there was actually a unit that stayed in these very dugouts that they dug throughout the Hostomel airport that ended up resurfacing in our news recently. And we were able to get confirmation today of something big. But before we get to that, I have to give you all a little bit of a dark background to make all the stories connect together and to explain why there's some significance between the story of the Antonov 225, the Antonov 124 that just escaped to Germany today, and the people that we're about to be talking about here in a second. Inside of these little dugouts sat multiple different Russian brigades that were fighting in this area, but one of them was the infamous 155th Naval Infantry Brigade. And let me go get them really quickly, the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade. This one right here. This Naval Infantry Brigade comes all the way from the far-flung regions of, let me think here, Vladivostok, all the way out in the Far East. This unit, however, has been one that has ended up getting a decent amount of ire and a great deal of I guess you could say, hatred from the West for a particular reason. The 155th Separate Guards Kursk Orders of Zhukov and Serverov Naval Infantry Brigade was responsible for a lot of the massacres and crimes against humanity that happened in the Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin area during that first month of the war. From February of 27th to about April 1st of 2022, the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade conducted the large amount of massacres that were seen and reported on after that moment throughout the entirety of the Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin area. There were other units involved, but the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade is the one that was solely responsible for the large majority of the massacres that occurred in this area. And out of that, there was one specific person who came out as a primary target and pretty much the Russian Joseph Mengele of this region, which was the commander of the 155th Brigade himself, which largely issued the orders on his own volition for the executions of hundreds, if not thousands, of Ukrainian civilians that were stuck behind the lines within this area. That commander was rumored to have been killed recently inside of a HIMARS strike that happened near to the area of Lvov in the Kursk Oblast. We heard that apparently an ATACMS ballistic missile was fired at the city of Lvov and shrunk a headquarters which supposedly had a large part of the entirety of the original command of the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade that was responsible for the massacres of Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin inside of its headquarters, and it was reported that a lot of that original staff from all the way back then that still was in charge of the brigade today was killed. We were largely working off of that report at face value because it was largely from Russian military bloggers and also from the chief of intelligence in Ukraine, Budanov, whose statements cannot really be taken at much more than just, passing statements, but still, we largely reported that several days ago. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense officially declared that the commander of the Russian 155th Marine Brigade, Sergei Ilian, the one responsible for most of the massacres at Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin, was killed in the Ukrainian strike that happened at Lvov several days ago using ATACMS ballistic missiles, as well as GMLRS missiles in unison with the ATACMS. This guy at the moment has pretty much been the #1 war criminal in the entirety of the war, and not only a war criminal, but also a main perpetrator of crimes against humanity. At this moment, the Russians are now confirming that Sergei Yuryevich Ilian has been killed as a result of Ukrainian strikes, meaning that Russia's worst butcher that we know of so far has been killed in a Ukrainian strike several days ago. So it finally appears that whether The Hague was going to see him or not, justice has been dealt to this one brutal psychopath of a person that was the commander of the 155th Brigade. And I'm happy to be able to report that information to y'all today and have true confirmation of it from the Russian Ministry of Defense, because if y'all had seen, some of y'all may not even really think about it too much these days, and personally I don't really either, but considering that this news came out today, I did go and take a look back at the atrocities that happened at Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin, and it was just absolutely gruesome stuff. Executions inside of basements, mass killings behind buildings, largely using machine gun fire to mow down dozens of citizens at a time of Ukraine that were not guilty of anything. This guy was an absolute heinous person. The crimes he committed, I would say, are up there with the Sturmabteilung of Nazi Germany or the SS of Nazi Germany, with the kind of crimes that they were conducting inside of Eastern Europe, and also inside of really Germany itself throughout the whole of World War II. This guy was pretty much a SS monster living in real life form in the present day. And it looks like he'll be joining them in hell most likely here after the events of the past few days. But nevertheless, it is a good thing to hear about, and, of course, great news to hear. But nevertheless, we are going to be moving on from more news than that. But before we get on into that, I do want to hear what y'all are thinking a little bit right now on U.S. policy, because we've actually been able to hear of a significant U.S. policy development that has happened today. One second. Dang.
Bless you.
Dang, thank you very much. But we were able to hear that the U.S. Senate has approved $500 million in military aid for Ukraine in a defense bill, according to Reuters. This picture has nothing to do with the aid. This is just a picture of Bradleys and Humvees awaiting shipment from years ago. But beyond that, it does appear that the United States is getting back into the gung-ho spirit of providing the Ukrainians with military equipment and arms. And a lot of people are wondering what the future U.S. position or shift is going to be on the Russian Federation. And what are people thinking about it, Matthew? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so clearly the U.S. is making some very, very strong promises to do something to Russia, but we're not really getting a complete blueprint of what they're going to do in exact, precise measures. But we are hearing rumors that apparently the U.S. president is extremely upset with Vladimir Putin. He's calling his statements bullshit, like we've covered before. And now the Senate, I believe it's the Armed Services Committee, or maybe I can't remember exactly which panel it is, but one of them has approved $500 million in aid to Ukraine. And also the president is saying he's going to use his presidential drawdown authority to send some of the $3 billion that's left in that authority to Ukraine immediately through NATO countries. So it does appear that something's happening, but let's see what y'all think in the audience. And it looks like 36%, the most popular choice, said no, the USA is not going to become hyper-aggressive against Russia, but the USA will do something against Russia to some extent. While 34% said yes, the USA is 100% turning on Russia, and 23% said likely so, but only time's going to tell. And on this one, I would say it might be somewhere in between, because to say the USA is going to 100% turn on Russia, it might happen over many months, up to a year, but it's not going to be immediate, because there's been a lot of game playing going on with these talks, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. We still see Marco Rubio meeting with Lavrov. That's a bad sign. And also, we still see the games being played by the Russians to stall on the aid being sent to Ukraine. So I would say the U.S. is going to start by doing something, by approving this first $500 million package. It probably will be sent through NATO countries to Ukraine, and we're already seeing aid flow back to Ukraine as well. But to say we're going to become hyper-aggressive, I doubt that's going to be in the short term. We're probably going to see that over the course of another year or so. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that the United States will do something. I'd have to be with 35%. I'm not really sure if we're going to 100% turn on the Russians, because we do have to understand that there is a lot of doublespeak, if we want to say it that way, that's going on in the U.S. government. And Matthew is right with observing a lot of things. One, our public rhetoric is shifting, but at the same time, the Secretary of State and the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs just met in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia not too long ago, literally just yesterday, to speak about the situation. And then the Secretary of State said that some of the developments seemed a little promising and they were going to forward that to the president. And that doesn't really sound like something to me that sounds like we're going to be making a 100% turn against the Russians. And it still looks at the moment that the Russian Federation is generally at large at the moment. The United States is going to be turning against them completely like we did under the prior administration, at least to some degree. So I would generally have to say that they're going to do something, but I don't really know if they're going to be 100% turning on the Russians like some people are hoping at the moment. It would be very positive thing to see that we turn on the Russians again and treat them as our adversaries, which they are, but I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be happening quickly or how strong of a response that really will be in the long run. So at the moment, I'll have to go with the 36%, which is a safe option, and hopefully I'll be proven wrong, and the United States will 100% turn against the Russians here within the near future. It's just that...
But there is one other aspect, though, that I forgot to mention. Just like I was talking about with Xi Jinping, if he's having domestic political issues inside of China, that might cause him to maybe speed up an invasion of Taiwan. Same thing applies to the United States. If all of a sudden you start seeing really bad domestic political issues pile up, you might suddenly see either Russia becomes a hotbed for the United States or either Iran becomes a new hotbed for the United States. We're already much more aggressive toward Iran than we are Russia right now, so the natural inclination would be to think that if the U.S. was going to get aggressive on somebody, it would probably be the Iranians. They're going to be the punching bag, basically, if we need a distraction. But it's possible as well that maybe the Russians could become the distraction, but I think the odds are leaning more towards the Iranians would be that than the Russians. But the fact that we're sending aid whatsoever to Ukraine is a good shift, but I don't think it's going to be like a, snap your fingers and it's done type of deal. It's going to be over the course of a month, 2 months, 3 months, and it's going to get progressively worse on Putin as time goes by.
I would have to largely agree. I also saw someone say in the chat, and it was an interesting point. I'm trying to see if I can find it again. The chat moves so quickly these days, it's always hard to go back and try and find something, so I'll just have to leave it for what it is. But it was a really good question. I wish I could answer it. But someone was saying something along the lines of, if the Russian Federation continues on their current path, why wouldn't the United States turn against them? And it's generally, I can't even explain why. I don't even know why. There's clear answers to the foreign policy situations. We don't even really get to have a decision in them. They're kind of made for us, and that generally is the case. Now that I'm remembering what the real question was, someone asked, I can't give credit to you, but it was a great question, or a statement. They actually said that Lavrov was back in North Korea, and he was also asking for more support from the North Koreans, and he actually is at the moment, right after he got done talking in Kuala Lumpur about how the Russians want peace, and the Secretary of State said, I think he's actually legitimate about that. He then immediately flew to Pyongyang and is speaking to the North Korean government about more military support for the Russians. So it's like, how legitimate or sincere can the Russians even be when their first action after saying, let's start a new round of peace talks, is to immediately go to the North Koreans and start asking for new rounds of munitions. That's nothing that's showing that they want peace. That's showing that they're once again BSing the United States. And if we took that it seriously at all, I would just have to assume that the Department of State and the president is a fool at this point and just getting circles run around them. I mean, it's quite literally see-through at this point.
And also, how can Lavrov and the whole Russian gang go back to North Korea for more aid? Because at this point, I think the numbers are officially about 40% of the ammunition going to Russia is from North Korea. So almost half of the ammunition that Russia's using against Ukraine right now is from the North Koreans, which to me, that raises some red flags. Because how is North Korea able to manufacture so much equipment and in such a short period of time and also draw on their own stockpiles that they might need to fight against South Korea in the future if they want to do something to them? That seems a little bit fishy. I've always said and speculated for a long time that maybe North Korea is a conduit for China to send weapons to Russia. No proof of it, but it would seem to be probably logical if China wanted to do that and have some disassociation with it, they might send it through North Korea. And considering that Russia's taking 40% of it from North Korea, that certainly looks a little bit fishy. But how can they go back and ask for more aid with almost half of it coming from literally Kim Jong's regime? Like, that's crazy.
Well, the thing is that North Korea does not really have a massive consumer industry, but most, if not all, of North Korea's actual industries are war-based industries and have been for 70 years. And especially recently, with what I've heard today, and I've actually been trying to do a lot of research, folks, today on the North Koreans and their involvement in the conflict. North Korea makes, and this sounds cheap, but on a North Korean level, they're raking in money more than anyone else could. They're getting about $6 billion annually right now from their business dealings with the Russians, providing them with arms and equipment. So it's actually a huge moneymaker, because for those of y'all who may not know about the North Korean financial situation, North Korea is the most heavily sanctioned country in the world by everyone. Really, no one does any business with them at all, or no one does any trade with them, and for that reason, they've also been banned completely from any external financial institutions. So they have to come up with ways to be able to make US dollars specifically to be able to use to buy stuff. So what they generally do is they generally get into drug dealing, arms dealing, literally anything that an organized crime group would do. North Korea is like a large version of one of the cartels in Mexico at the moment. That's largely how they operate. But outside of that, the North Koreans recently found a way to make that money in almost a legit way, and not only that, more money than they've ever seen before. Also, by the way, Brian Blairstown brought up another good one. Counterfeiting is also a big thing that the North Koreans are into, is that they try and counterfeit U.S. money. But that doesn't really work all too well these days, so they've largely went back into just drug trading, arms dealing, that sort of a thing. But with the Russians, they have a direct access to the largest arms market in the world right now in terms of consumption. So they are able to pump out their normal production of shells, and instead of just storing them and really not making any money off of them, they're able to trade them with the Russians for food directly, and also raw cash, which the North Korean government can then use to buy whatever they would want, either from the Chinese or elsewhere. So with that in mind, the North Koreans are absolutely incentivized to turn the entire country's industry into war industry, because they will be able to use the money they get from that war production to buy literally anything and everything with. And to give you all a little bit of an idea here, the North Koreans, at least as far as we understood before the war, were getting about $500 million to maybe $1 billion in hard cash every year through their illicit criminal activities around the world. Just giving the Russians weapons, they're getting $6 billion a year now. So they've seen about a 600% increase in the amount of liquid, hard foreign cash that they're able to spend annually. That's a huge thing for them. So Lavrov going there and saying, "Would you give us more weapons?" It's almost a symbolic thing, because the North Koreans are always going to answer yes, because it makes them more money, and that allows the Kim regime to use that money however they would need to be able to keep doing whatever North Korea wants to do, whether it's expand its nuclear program, or provide more food security to its citizens, or to somehow expand its electrical grid to further increase their war production. The results of that sort of a cooperation is limitless, at least in the minds of the North Koreans, and their abilities to continue to pretty much grow their ability to wage war, or to produce a stronger, more founded citizenry to fight those wars with. However,
Yeah, but they've obviously got a lot of labor in North Korea, like pretty much limitless labor when it comes to assembling and manufacturing these things. But the catch is, though, where are they getting the components to do all this? Because they're having to get gunpowder, they're having to get components to make the shells, they're having to get all this different stuff. And surely North Korea isn't that limitless when it comes to getting all these different pieces to put together these munitions. That doesn't make much sense to me, because do they even have the natural resources to do that on their own accord, or do they naturally have to get these parts from China and then assemble them in North Korea and then send them to Russia?
They actually have the ability to produce most of their basic shells and munitions entirely in North Korea. They are able to mine the resources that they need, the iron, the steel, because North Korea and South Korea are actually a little bit different. North Korea has more of the flatter fertile lands. That's even a little bit of a sell for South Korea. But generally, South Korea is able to produce a lot more food than North Korea, and that's relative for the Korean Peninsula. On a global scale, it's quite small. But they're able to produce more food. They have more usable farmland, but they also have less in the way of material resources like iron deposits, coal deposits, and such. On the other hand, North Korea has hardly any fertile land at all, even before the March of Suffering. But they also have a great deal of untapped and tapped raw deposits of resources that would be needed for an industrialized state, like coal and iron deposits. And if you have coal and iron in large amounts, you're able to produce steel. And with steel, you can generally produce rifles, bullets, bullet casing. Well, bullet casings are usually made out of brass, but you can make them out of steel. That's also easily done as well. They also have a decent amount of sulfur deposits as well, which is one of the larger parts for producing gunpowder. So the North Koreans actually have everything in-house, all of the basic materials to be able to produce the simplest types of munitions. So pretty much your high explosive artillery shells, they're able to produce those by the tens of thousands because they have the ability to literally produce those vertically and horizontally entirely inside of North Korea as far as the production chain goes.
So I'm seeing here, I was doing some quick research real quick because I'm still like, I understand what you're saying, but I'm having a hard time believing that North Korea can simply take this much raw components from their own territory and manufacture weapons in this quantity. Because naturally, under normal circumstances, I believe you. Like they can manufacture based on what they have domestically in North Korea, the normal quantities that they need. But this quantity is wild. Like with Russia, and this is Russia, this is them selling to a foreign country, and they're getting 40% of their nation's needs to fight a war from North Korea, which is a very small little country. That doesn't make much sense to me. So I was doing some looking here, and it looks like North Korea heavily relies on imported components to make their metallurgical components, also their advanced electronic guidance systems, and pretty much anything they need, like semiconductors and things like that. They have to get them primarily from, guess where? From China. So the way I see it is China is giving North Korea everything they need to assemble these weapons, giving them the raw components, the metals, things like that. North Korea supplements it with their own from their own territory, but they're getting a huge portion of it from China. And basically, it's kind of like the Apple thing. Apple phones are designed in California, but they're made in China or made in India. It's kind of like that. These weapons are made in North Korea, but they're sourced a lot from China. So it gives China that little bit of plausible deniability to say, we're not necessarily giving weapons to Russia, but in reality, they kind of are because they're giving North Korea what they need in a pretty large quantity to actually make these weapons. It's kind of crazy.
But at the same time, though, what you were listing off were more so advanced computer components for the large part, and for your simple 152 millimeter artillery shells, which is what the Russians are getting from the North Koreans primarily, all of that can be made in-house. The gunpowder inside the shells, the explosives, the steel itself, the anything inside of those shells. Because it's a simple high explosive shell. It doesn't take a lot to make these. Those can be made entirely in North Korea from the ground up. So while they might be getting some support from the Chinese to get semiconductors for, say, your ballistic missiles, these are entirely made inside of North Korea. And they've had the ability to do this literally the entire time North Korea's existed. And to give you a little bit of an idea as well, speaking on World War II industrial figures, which as far as the existing industry in any country in the world, it was about 6 times or 7 times smaller than what we see in the world currently. The British alone, from 1939 to 1945, were able to produce 170 million artillery shells over the course of about 6 years, just inside of the British Islands alone. Just to give an idea of how big munitions production can get inside of a state the size of North Korea. And Britain actually had a comparable population size to the North Koreans in the present day during World War II. And most importantly, they also had the same raw materials inside of the United Kingdom, a large amount of coal, iron, and some sulfur deposits, much like the North Koreans would, and they were also able to produce an ungodly number of artillery shells during the Second World War. So if the North Koreans wanted to, which they generally have for their entire history, they could just focus entirely on war production and pump these things out until the cows come home, and not really run into any significant issues.
But get this though. They're saying right now, this is data from 2024, by the way. North Korea was importing about $150 million in Chinese exports into North Korea. It was 150 million. But in the last year or so that we've seen up until the present, there's been a 30% year-on-year increase in Chinese exports to North Korea. It's gone up to 194 million from 150 million. Now, the population of North Korea has not, suddenly exploded out of nowhere. So you got to account for why there's a huge increase in these year-on-year imports from China. And I would say it's sort of backed up by the idea these are dual-use goods being sent to North Korea. It also includes metals and includes things to actually build these munitions right here. And that's why you're seeing such a large 30% increase in the Chinese exports going to North Korea. So I'm still going to stick to my guns on that one. I think China is giving North Korea what they need to ramp up the quantity. Now, they are, of course, like you're saying, they are getting stuff from North Korea domestically. North Korea is to build these weapons, but they don't have enough to build it in this quantity. The quantities are simply too large, and they need to keep ramping up production. So that's why China is starting to export so much to the North Korean regime, is to actually help Russia.
But on the flip side, though, you could just explain the increase in imports from China into North Korea due to the fact that North Korea has more expendable income to purchase Chinese goods to be imported with. Because
Oh, no, these aren't for civilians, by the way. These aren't for civilians. These are dual-use goods, like mainly like metals and raw components that they're increasing their imports with. It's not necessarily stuff for the civilians. It's stuff for the military industry.
but can you explain what the dual use goods technically are?
Let's see here. It says oil, machinery, electronics, and other military equipment and commodities is typically what's included in that major 30% increase.
Machinery, like do they specify what kind? Because if it's like a tractor or some other form of machinery like that, that wouldn't really be a dual use good. You know, it's like, yeah, it's a machine, like it's technically a moving vehicle, but you know, that wouldn't really be used for wartime purposes, at least as far as the North Koreans would be concerned to support the Russians with.
Well, I mean, the North Koreans aren't suddenly buying like large numbers of tractors because they're still poor. Like they can't afford those anyway. So it's not like they're importing, like a bunch of Kubotas or something like that to start selling them in North Korea. It would be machinery, at least in my opinion, to support the war manufacturing effort. So that way they can send more to Russia. Because if it's not going to civilians and it's not going to the Kim regime directly, then it must be going to their industry. And specifically, what's the main industry like we've been talking about that's ramping up production? That is the war industry and the industry that's producing munitions.
Maybe, but there are a lot of large projects that we can observe on satellite that would result in a massive importation of, say, Chinese steel or machinery or anything else like that. Like, for example, the North Koreans are currently developing this 5-kilometer stretch, and they still are currently, of this giant tourist village that's right next to the Wonsan airport to become a large beach and tourist attraction for their citizens and also for foreign tourists as well. And that would require a huge amount of concrete, steel, and other kinds of industrial goods that could be imported from China. I'm not saying that it couldn't be used to support the Russian war effort, but at the same time, if they're getting a lot of money from the Russian Federation because of their arms trading with them, the North Koreans could just use that money to import other stuff from China so that way they can conduct other projects inside of their country, like this large tourist village or other major industrial ideas or concerns or factories that they're trying to build, or maybe even to build new factories in general to increase the amount of artillery shell output that they're able to get for the Russians. Because out of everything that they produce and use so far or give to the Russians, it's mostly all, I mean, it's something like 80 to 90% of everything they give the Russians is just raw high explosive artillery shells, and that's not too difficult for the North Koreans or anyone in the world to produce if you have the factories and machining that exists, and the North Koreans had plenty of that for about the past 70 to 80 years. So I don't know, maybe you're right, maybe I'm right, who knows, but still, I generally think that increase, because it's a minor one at that, it's only like a $50 million increase of imports into North Korea, that more so sounds like it's possibly construction materials for internal domestic projects than it would be to help the North Koreans produce shells to sell to the Russians to then make extra billions on top of that to be able to keep their war effort going or to keep their production going. That's generally the stance I'm at. But beyond that, though, before we get on into the rest of our news, we do have an interesting question on that. And a lot of people are wondering, do you believe North Korea is a conduit for China to send weapons to Russia? And a lot of people have been putting in their opinions. Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so me and the Enforcer have hashed this one out pretty much all the way at this point. So let's see what the audience is thinking about the exact question. Do you believe North Korea is a conduit for China to send weapons to Russia, either with raw components or either sending the straight up weapons to North Korea to send to Russia? Either way, do you think that's the case? 71% said yes, it's always been that way. So overwhelming majority say that, while 13% said maybe somewhat, but not totally. And 9% said no, North Korea is a real weapons provider and they produce them all on their own accord with no help from the outside whatsoever, even though they literally can't even provide food for themselves. But I would say I'm with the 71%. I believe it's probably been that way. Now, do I have like something on paper to show you that's the case? Sadly, I don't, and nobody really does, and nobody probably ever will either, because they don't really publish that information between China and North Korea because it's very secretive. So All we have is raw numbers to go off of, and we can speculate about what's being sent, but I can't like point to something and say, here's the definitive concrete proof that this is happening, because if we had that, then it'd be a lot easier to say North Korea is complicit in the war and we need to go all after North Korea. But sadly, we can't really say that. All we can say is it looks likely the case. So I'm with the 71%. I do believe that is the case. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it depends. As far as ballistic missiles go, or anything that requires computer guidance, they are obviously getting semiconductors and other sorts of vital computer components and such things from outside countries like China. But as far as it goes for simple artillery shells, like high explosive 152 millimeter shells, those are entirely produced inside of North Korea. They've generally never needed any support to produce those, and all of the markings that we've ever seen on shells in Russia that are supposedly provided by North Korea, they always have North Korean munition markings on them. They never have Chinese markings. And any other equipment we've ever seen that's not an artillery shell that's been provided to the Russians have also generally been some form of a North Korean system, like a North Korean domestically produced MLRS, or a North Korean domestically produced ballistic missile with foreign components inside of it. But also at the same time, though, if we were to make the argument that the North Koreans are always getting support to keep their arms industry going, technically the reason why Russia's keeping their war in Ukraine going is because of American technical support, because based off of independent studies conducted recently, most if not all Russian aircraft that are flying or are currently being produced at a trickle at the moment inside of Russia are generally made up of about 60 to 70% Western sourced computer components, including a large part of that being US sourced computer components. So you generally could say that the United States is pretty much supplying the Russians with the same semiconductors and computers China is supplying North Korea for a shadow war where the U.S. is technically supporting the Russians and their war industry to be able to keep fighting the Ukrainians, which I don't really know if that would necessarily be the case. It most likely would not be in either one. But I generally would say that I would still stick with, at least on most of the arms support that the North Koreans are providing to the Russians, the North Koreans are mostly producing that entirely on their own. Unless if it's something that requires some sort of a computer system inside, that is of course sourced from a foreign country. But if it's something like a dumb shell, like a HE round, that is entirely produced from the ground up in North Korea, at least from what I would assume. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. I think Matthew and me are going to disagree on that one till the end of time, because I think generally they might be doing that on their own, because North Korea can't feed their people. But one thing they've always done is that they've been able to produce nuclear weapons on their own. They've been able to produce thousands of artillery pieces on their own, along with the ammunition for them. And so while they might not be able to feed their people, that's because they got their priorities all around. They've been focusing on producing weapons of war their entire history and not feeding their people. That's just kind of the general rule with them. So with them being able to produce exorbitant amounts of shells, I expect that would be the case. If they ever started producing a lot of food and North Korean people started to look obese, that's when we know there's some foreign involvement going on there somewhere, because there's no way that North Korea can produce enough food for their people. But with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of our news for the night. But before we move on into the rest of that news, which we still have lots of, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions from the chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night, this one goes to none other than Hokey Redneck, who threw in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that support and being a longtime channel legend. And it's good to see you once again. He said, any updates on the new Enforcer HQ 3.0?
And we do have some updates. It is generally going to be in the Salt Lake City area. We do not know exactly where, and of course we won't say exactly where even when it gets set up, but it is going to be in the general Salt Lake City area. So that we can promise y'all. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you for support, Hoagie Redneck, and helping this channel to keep running. And I'm glad that you cared to ask. That's a really good question. And hopefully we'll be able to see all of y'all in our new Enforcer HQ 3.0 in Salt Lake City sometime in late October or November, sometime around then. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 50 from Rick Galentian, our viewer from Canada, who's also a longtime channel legend and throws in a 50 as well. And huge shout out to you, Rick, for that generous support, and we appreciate you very much. And he said, greetings from Vancouver and Coffee and Donut Fund contribution.
Hey, and thank you so much for your support, Rick Galician. And a big hello to Vancouver in Canada. Not Vancouver, Washington. That's Vancouver, Canada. And a big hello to you once again. And thank you for the Coffee and Donut Fund. Donuts actually sound pretty good these days. And hopefully we'll be able to get some soon, because coffee and donuts sounds really good at the moment. I don't know why, well, I know why, because it's freaking good. What else do we need? But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. Also, by the way, I thought I would share this with y'all because I was actually watching some stuff about how North Korea made their money today. And, you know, Matthew, there was a really interesting park that actually existed down here near the former Haigumgang Hotel, and it's inside of this national park right here.
Oh, that's the Great Leaders National Park right there.
Yeah, you know, it's I'm not even gonna say the name. I don't know how YouTube would take it. I heard someone say it flat out. What?
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's just the name of it. I mean, it's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. So to quickly talk to y'all about this, this is the Mount Kumgang National Park, and this park was actually the only one that South Koreans were ever allowed into in large numbers from 1998 to 2008, and around 3 million South Korean tourists would end up wandering through this area. But that all ended in 2008 after the North Koreans shot and killed a 53-year-old woman when she wandered off of a path. I'm not even kidding. She just wandered off of a path a little bit, and they shot and killed her. So then the South Koreans banned all travel into that area inside of the Kumgang National Park, and so that was the end of the Kumgang experience. So a little bit unfortunate with that. But you know what they always say?
Go back real quick to that first image you showed of it real quick. Just go back and show that one real quick. I want to point something out. Let's see. It was the one of the waterfall picture. Like you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know this one.
Now, see right here, believe it or not, if y'all have ever heard of the guy, old fella, retirement home fella, Mr. Fredrickson wanted his house to be sitting on the side of this place right here. If you do recall, there's that waterfall, and there's also the little spot where the house would be on up, right over here on the right. I think this is actually where it's based off of, actually.
No, that was in South America. Like that was definitely in South America. Bro, if he landed here, he would have been shot and killed. Like honestly,
Mr. Fredrickson's going to the POW camp, baby.
Mr. Fredrickson goes to the glorious DPRK. But some people are laughing. People are like, "Is it legitimately called Kumgang?" Yes, it's literally called Kumgang, but with a K at the front of it. But that's the name. It's an absolutely crazy place, and I believe. Let's see. Yeah, here's the city of Kumgang right here. So if you live in North Korea, you can actually live in a town called Kumgang, no joke. And you can also live in another city further north, which is called the city of Hamhung. The jokes write themselves inside of North Korea. We would be executed for making these jokes if we were inside of the country, but we're not inside of North Korea, and I don't give a damn, so we're going to make fun of it. And it is a ridiculous name for a national park. I don't care what, like, I got to be honest with y'all. I do not care what this actually means in Korean. This name is absolutely hilarious. Like, it is legitimately hilarious. And you could say it unironically because it's a real place. It is an actual thing that exists out there in the world. But you know, you know what was also interesting, man? They made a special administrative zone. I believe it was called something like the Kumgang Tourist Zone or something like that. It was carved out of the province that it was a part of, and I forgot the name of the province. It's this large one. It's like the Hoyang province or something like that. But it wasn't a really large province. But the North Koreans always said that size doesn't matter. And I guess that was true. Size didn't really matter. It was more so about the tourism, or more so the bang for the buck you got. And you certainly were paying by the hour in the Mount Kumgang National Park for the experience that you had. Sadly, it didn't last too long, and general disappointment as well as bad fallouts resulted because of the execution of the 53-year-old woman. She just could not handle the national park, and so they shut it down for good. But anyways, also, by the way, I forgot to mention to y'all, there's actually a floating hotel here, by the way, too. Like, that's a floating hotel. It floats on the ocean. It's not a ship, either. It's a barge that has a hotel built on top of it.
That's crazy right there, honestly. I have a joke that I have queued up that I want to say so bad, like I'm having to fight myself not to say it. It's not appropriate for the stream, but I just want to say it so bad.
Well, go ahead, Matthew. You've said it. Now you got everyone intrigued. Go ahead. Tell the class what you got.
You know what Kim Jong-un's favorite dish is in the palace in Pyongyang?
What? What is his favorite dish?
I'm being totally serious here. It's some young guy. Have you ever heard of it? It's like a special dish that he came out with. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I'll tell you. It's honestly like that. I'm not sure if they import that or if that's something they have domestically in Pyongyang. I'm not really sure, but yeah, that new dish, some young guy just never really seen it, but it's apparently on the menu.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Bro, you know, there was this guy that lived on this island who also sold, I'm just kidding, by the way. I'm just kidding. There's no list. But anyways, we're going to be moving on out of North Korea, and we're going to be moving on into the rest of, actually, our last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night. But beyond that, I do thank you for support, Rick Galichin. I hope that did address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're getting on as the rest of the news.
All right, so our last one here goes to Hokey Redneck once again, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Hokey, as well, for that support. He said, didn't the Russians have a carrier named Kiev?
Actually, let me go pull it. I think it was a battle cruiser. Kiev. Oh shoot! It was their little LHD thing. They had one for a time, actually. Now that you reminded me, they had one of these. It was technically like a helicarrier sort of a thing. It can only operate VTOL aircraft and helicopters, so it pretty much filled the role that a LHD would here in the West. But they did actually have one. It was called the Kiev class, not spelled K-Y-I-V. It was spelled K-I-E-V in the Russified version of the city of Kiev. But they actually did have one. I think they had a couple of these. Yeah, they actually had 4 of them. One of them is still active, and 2 of them have been preserved. But these actually did exist for a time. So, yes, that actually was a thing. So I do thank you for the support and help this channel to keep on running, Hokey Redneck. And I hope that does answer that question incredibly well. That was a great one. And that actually racked my memory to think, oh, yeah, they actually did have one of those at a point. But with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. And, folks, it is an hour and a half into this show. And believe it or not, we still have a lot of news to go. We have hardly touched on anything so far tonight, believe it or not. So I'm going to start getting through this news a little bit rapid fire style in the Middle East. This is mostly preparatory developments in the area. We were able to hear that a Russian Il-76 flew from the Russian Federation into Tehran today carrying an unspecified cargo, as another high-level Iranian official has been declared dead. Al-Tayyib, former head of Ayatollah Khomeini's delegation of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Sarala headquarters, died yesterday. The cause of death is currently unknown at the moment, but it's led a lot of people to have a great deal of mystery and intrigue about his death, considering that a large amount of top leaders have been assassinated recently inside of Tehran. Outside of that, we were able to see a U.S. RC-135 Rivet Joint take off from its airbase inside of Al Udeid in Qatar and fly towards the area of western Yemen, most likely conducting a reconnaissance operation against the Yemeni forces and preparing for future U.S. actions in the area against Iranian proxy forces, which are currently operating inside the region. We were also able to hear that the Egyptians have announced today that they are now fielding and operating the HQ-9B long-range air defense system created by the People's Republic of China. These air defense systems have a range of around 160 miles and is generally believed to be analogous to the S-300 air defense system currently present inside the Russian Federation. Its operational abilities are currently unknown at the moment, but we will be waiting to see if we can get any kind of information or operational characteristics and intelligence about the systems as the years continue to pass. We've also been able to hear inside of Syria, near to the small port town of Jable, that it appears that a ammunition depot went Jable earlier today, and we were able to see that explosion here on this clip. And look at that explosion go.
I can literally hear the crickets.
Man. Oh. There it was, finally. But moving on from that explosion inside of Syria, we are also able to hear that the Turks are going to be making missiles from the ground up. We're going to pause the clip here, but Turkey has stated they are planning to be able to produce the raw materials for the missiles all the way up until final inspection and fielding of the missiles, and also exportation from inside of Turkey, not requiring any external components in the process, meaning that Turkey might end up being a wild card missile producer and seller within the region, as there will be no U.S. or Western control over who they end up selling their missiles to. But you can actually see some of them here on display.
You said from the ground up.
Yeah, from the ground up.
I mean, you wouldn't want to build it from the sky down. I mean, surely not.
Well,
why do people say stupid stuff like that? I mean, why do they say stupid stuff?
Well, you want to invade Iran? Shouldn't you know the population? Like,
you've never heard that comedian say that, by the way? It's like some guy like takes like a problem with like every old statement like that.
No, I haven't actually.
He's hilarious. I like it.
Bruh, that guy must be absolutely killer with the jokes. Bro, laugh like Tucker really quick, man. We gotta have it.
Man, you gotta like prime for that. I can't just like jump into that laugh. Like, give me something.
Dang
like,
it, man! I was trying to do it, and then I was like, I failed. I was like, you gotta follow up so I don't.
I have to have like, I have to like work into that. Like, I have to have something like stupid that he would say, and then I can do the laugh. Just like I can just summon the laugh out of the blue.
Well, let's pretend, man, like you're Tucker and I'm Ted, and we're sitting down, and you're asking me about how many people live in Iran.
Let's see here. Zen is not a sin. It's fantastic. It has your head buzzing and your hands clinging. Oh!
There we go. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was
man,
perfect.
that was Tucker Light.
Oh man, it's not important, Tucker. It honestly wasn't important at all. I don't even know why that was considered to be an important topic because I don't know when the world has ever mattered how many people live in a country if we have to go to war with them. If we have to go to war with them, we just have to go to war. It doesn't really matter how many people live in the country. That was a really stupid question.
That was
to
just
be
a
entirely-
gotcha question. That's all it was. It was
Yeah.
just intended to make the guy look stupid, and it ended up backfiring on Tucker. Actually, at least in my opinion.
Oh man, I've seen a million memes made about that. It's like, do you know how many people live in the Great Qing? And then like Ted Cruz is like, there's many, but that's not important. You know, something like it's like honestly, man, that whole exchange just looks stupid. It's like, you know, like if I was Cruz, just to be honest with y'all, I would have responded. Does that matter if we have to go to war with them? I mean, did we ask the question how many people lived in Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan when we went to war with them in World War II? We didn't. So what kind of an importance does that have on this situation right now? Like honestly, like I don't know why that wasn't said because that was a great question. Like why in the world did that matter? I don't even know. But then the justification for supporting the Iranians was a terrible justification. Supporting the Israelis. Sorry, I had a Bushism there. Supporting the Israelis was a bad justification in my opinion. It's like I don't think the U.S. government makes decisions based off of the Bible. You know, it's like, aren't we supposed to have a separation of church and state here? Shouldn't there be a strategic reason for this more so than the Bible says? I was like, that doesn't really seem like a good strategic justification to me, you know, like even being a Christian. I was like, that doesn't even really sound like it sounds good, you know. I was like honestly, that whole thing was a really big crapshoot. But anyways, moving on from that, and out of the Middle East, it is time for us to make our way into Europa, where we were able to hear that the French did say the Russians were a big threat, and we also were able to hear about that Antonov 124 making its way into Germany. Now, moving on into the Ukrainian news, we were able to hear near to the area of Gomel that Russian drones were flying over the city, which was seen in broad daylight in this clip right here. What tucked up?
Oh, look, it's the return of the Home Depot Call of Duty.
Man,
The Cub Cadet, they're coming in sideways. Look at that.
Man, you said the Home Depot Call of Duty. Like, bro, don't give Call of Duty any ideas. They'll make a Home Depot map before long. You always are fighting in the weirdest places in that game. It's like, quick, you're fighting in a construction yard. Quick, you're fighting in a supermarket. It's like, where in the hell do people actually fight in these kinds of conditions? Like, that's my question. But there it is again. Oh, that dog is rare.
I hear a dog.
Man, I heard a dog and a kid. Like, that doesn't really sound like it doesn't really sound safe to fly drones with explosives on them over dogs and kids. You know what I mean? But beyond that, it does appear that some Russian drones were flying over Belarus. But before we get on into the rest of this news, I do want to make sure that we talk about the question that Matthew's asked all of y'all about what's going on with Iran. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. And also, by the way, I see some people that are living in Salt Lake City that are so happy the Enforcer HQ is moving next door to them. And I must say, I'm very excited for that. I do like y'all's city very much. But anyways, jumping into this poll right here and getting focused on it, the question says, a Russian heavy cargo plane landed in Tehran, Iran today, and is both China and Russia arming Iran for war? And it looks like 79% said yes, both countries are arming Iran, not just one or the other, but both, while 10% said only China is arming Iran, and 3% said only Russia is arming Iran. And I would say both of them are certainly arming Iran. I think that at this point it's becoming very apparent that all these cargo flights surely must be at least somewhat related to weapon shipments of some sort. And considering we just heard the other day that China's going to provide an air defense system to Iran, I mean, it pretty much the story writes itself at this point. So I would say that China's probably providing a lot more than Russia, but Russia is going to give something. It's like a little tithe that they're making to the Iranians, just to let them know that they're buddies still a little bit, and that's going to be pretty much where it sits. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I would agree that both countries are trying to arm the Iranians at this point, because God knows the only way that the Iranians will survive the upcoming tumults and tribulations will be through foreign support, because the Iranians sure as hell do not have this on their own. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, in my opinion. And moving on from that, it's now time for us to get on into the internal Ukraine war news. We were able to hear out of Western Ukraine that apparently some Ukrainian companies are saying that the Europeans are trying to steal Ukrainian drone technology, which was alleged today. I just got to be entirely honest with y'all really quickly. What technology are they stealing because generally the Ukrainians have been using commercial FPVs throughout most of the war, and also a lot of the drones that they have that are produced in scale are some of the cheapest, most stripped down drones possible because they're not going to survive for long because they're going to blow up. So I don't really know what this is alleging the Europeans are stealing, because it's not really like it's any technology that the Europeans wouldn't already have in some form. So interesting allegation, but I feel like that one's an unfounded allegation at best. Nevertheless, we were able to hear out of Kyiv that Zelensky did state that arms support from the United States has resumed and U.S. arms shipments are making it into the country. And we've also been able to hear that hundreds of Russian drones were launched in an attack recently in the Ukraine, affecting a decent part of the eastern and central parts of the country. Outside of that, we also have been able to hear news from inside of the Sumy Oblast, where the Ukrainian special forces were able to take a Russian prisoner. And we see him bringing him out right here.
That guy actually just like landed on Earth or something. He's not sure where he's at.
Bro, he's like, I don't know where I'm at, man.
Man, they're walking him around like Pinocchio or something. Oh man, I tell you, Pinocchio. Yeah, walk that way, buddy. Just get over here in the trench and sit down.
Dude, wouldn't it be great if when you interrogated Russians, their nose grew like Pinocchio when they were lying? How many of there were you? There were 5. Whoop! You're lying. There were 2. There were only 2.
Man, I'll tell you what, with the Russian soldiers, it's not like a growing nose. They start fiending more for the drink. They're like, yeah, I have to have some vodka. Like, please, I have to have some vodka. It's like, no vodka for you. Let him simmer. Let him simmer. The more he goes fiending for vodka, the more he'll tell the truth.
Man,
this was like the backwoods of Alabama a little bit right here with this like brush and like twigs everywhere and stuff.
Bing, ding, 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 ding. Ma, get the barbecue running. We got another Russian here. but anyways, you can see them bringing the Russian out. The rest of the clip is just them bringing them back to where they are trying to get him to be processed. So we're going to cut the clip a little short. But moving on to our location unknowns, we also got to see some drone protection built in to a Swedish BV-206. The Ukrainians are also cope-cageifying a lot of the vehicles these days.
Honestly, that looks actually kind of sick. Actually, I like that. That looks like that bulldozer that fellow came up with that one time in America.
Oh, you mean Marvin Heemeyer, the guy who created like the Killdozer or whatever?
I didn't know his whole name, but you seem to be very familiar with him, so I guess that's him.
Yeah, man, I got photographic memory. I remember everything that I see for the large part. But I remember that guy, man, because I actually listened to his recordings. And honestly, dude, he sounded like the most like Pee Wee Herman kind of a guy ever. Like you would not expect someone that did that to have that kind of a voice. Because he was like, when people push you too far, and I was like, I didn't expect him to sound like that. Like I was like totally expecting something different. But moving on from that, we also got to see this tracked ground vehicle that the Ukrainians have produced and are soon to field in large numbers. This thing actually is stylized, which is pretty sick. Look at it go. It helps to carry.
They're filming this like they're filming it like they're trying to sell it or something. Like they're honestly selling me on it.
Honestly, man, I'd buy one. I don't know what I'd use it for, but it'd be cool. Dang, look at that thing. Bro, that thing was torqued up. Oh, dang.
I see one problem though. They didn't strap down the ammo cans. You're gonna fall out with them driving like that. But other than that though, it looked pretty sick. Like if they just had one like strap of Velcro, like a strap on the top, it would be like perfect.
And speaking of one strapped piece of Velcro, we have been able to see that the Russians have been shellacked like a worn-out piece of strap of Velcro. As we were able to see, the Misty Sakira, the record stated that 222 drones is tied with May 27th of 2025 as the 14th highest daily loss, and the total now exceeds 45,000. Equipment numbers continue to drop, but troops average over 1,000 per day. And according to the casualty reports that we've been able to hear, 1,040 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 24 hours, along with 7 APCs, 76 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 23 artillery systems, 222 drones, 14 cruise missiles, and that was about it. But still, a very impressive thing to see, and great to know that the Ukrainians are still inflicting a great deal of losses onto the Russian army. Outside of that, and in the Yemen area, we also were able to see the Ukrainians repelling a Russian assault with their drones in the Signum unit. The Russian Federation continues to try and break out in the Yemen area, but are continuing to fail, and are not really making any ground, but also taking significant losses. And this clip is showing that very thing. Failed attacks continuously happening and failing. And look at them. They hit them. Oh, that was actually a pretty heavy hit right there.
And that thing had everything. It had the minesweeper on the front. It had the little chains to try to stop stuff, but it couldn't stop the drone from hitting it. That's just crazy. They can't defend against the drones. They just cannot figure it out.
Man, that was like the Russian army equivalent of getting your car with all the options.
Yeah, all the options that are useless that you'll never use.
And look, they took out the whole column, both APCs and the tank. And oh, it was a T-72B3 with the armor add-ons. That's actually rare. That's actually incredibly rare. I can't believe we've seen one of these at this point in the war. That's like a unicorn at this point. Holy, did you see that? The hole in the armor plating?
That's what was that made from?
I think it was from the first drone. And if that was from the first drone, I don't know what it was carrying, but it went through the contact one, the additional ceramic plates on the front of the armor, and it looks like it went clean through, actually. So that is crazy. It killed the driver, I'm assuming, instantly, because that's right in front of the driver's port. So, that tank was taken out pretty much instantly. We can see the second one hitting, and we can now see the tank smoking. But it also is showing that the front upper armor on the upper hull of the T-72s is actually a lot weaker than was originally believed, once again. But we also can see a Type 75 MLRS. This is actually a North Korean-provided MLRS being destroyed on the front lines here. This is why I'm saying that the Chinese are not using the North Koreans for a lot of what the North Koreans are sending, because this is literally a medieval hwacha that the North Koreans sent the Russians. Let me go show you what a hwacha looks like. Let's see, hwacha rocket launcher. There we go. Here we are. This is the hwacha. Let me go show it to y'all. This is a North Korean rocket artillery system from the medieval era.
That does look similar, actually.
Yeah, it looks just like it. It's like a modern version of the hwacha. I got to keep saying it that way. It's fun to say it. But beyond that, that's why I'm saying, Matthew, that the Chinese sure as hell are not providing the North Koreans with stuff to send the Russians primarily. I mean, from time to time, they're giving them like some components to help them produce the stuff. But things like this, I mean, you can't it's very hard. It's very hard to make the statement, yeah, the Chinese are definitely helping to make this piece of garbage. Like, if the Chinese were involved, it's going to be, like, half decent. And this is literally, like, the 500 years ago tech that the North Koreans are giving to the Russians.
I'm sticking to my guns. I'm sticking to my guns, man. I see you sneaking it in there. I'm sticking to my guns.
Man, I'm just saying, man. I don't think the Chinese would be providing the Russians with no hwacha. But beyond that, we can see the Ukrainians obliterating the hwacha, or the Type 75.
Would you like some matcha with your hwacha?
And they got it.
You have all the Ukrainian hipsters wanting to join the military if you offered a little bit of matcha with your hwacha.
Man, dude, you know what's crazy, man, is that chai means tea. And so if you say chai tea, you're just saying TT. He said it. He said TT. Get it? Like pissing yourself. But anyways, moving on from that clip and on into our next one, just a little bit further down towards Seversk, we were able to hear that the Ukrainians are making ground towards Zola-Tarivka, which is just a little ways away from Seversk. So great to see that the Ukrainians are starting to make ground within this area. Outside of that, and in the Tourette's front, we also got to see the Ukrainians evacuating some of their wounded comrades in the area and nearly getting hit by a 82mm mortar. And here's the clip. They successfully got out of the way in time.
Твою мать! Надо уёбывать нахуй. Братан, заползай в укрытие! Мы что-то придумаем, подожди! Я не могу даже долезть.
And that's the end of that clip, but still showing us a little bit of the heavy fighting going on around Touretsk at the moment. With that, we are now moving down to Pokrovsk, where we also got to see the Russians getting hit by the Worm Busters unit, which is Madyar's birds. We see them
That
flying.
blew my ears out, by the way. Like, that was also, that guy was deep fried when he spoke too. That audio was busted.
Dude, that guy literally in the clip was talking like, "Oh my god, I have to get him." I was like, dang. I was like, bro, that is loud.
What the hell is this?
This is the Russian Bobs and Bits motor pool. It's just whatever the hell they could find with a running engine in it.
Yeah, it looked like a kind of like a off-brand Jeep with like the top cut off of it on the back.
I think technically it was like a chop-shopped UAZ 469, I think is what it is. You know, folks, I don't know a damn thing about cars. I couldn't tell you one car from the other. But when it comes to military equipment, I'll be able to get you the exact number and type of the system. I don't know what this thing is, though, actually. But they did get it as well. And it's toasting nicely down there. And Chris Bradford said, "God dang it, Bobby, that boy ain't right." And they aren't. They sure as hell aren't. But moving on from that and down towards the area of Velika Novoselka, we also got to see the Ronin unit taking out some Russian T-62s and T-55s. Ancient stuff. These tanks are about 60 and 70 years old. But we can see them here hitting a T-62. Very old. These were introduced in the 60s. And hitting it again. Oh, and what's this? Are they hitting it a third time, perchance? Holy smokes, wait a minute, let me look at that. Okay, so that's just a normal T-55. This is a T-55. Back here is a T-62. You can tell because of the turret placement on the hull. The T-55 has a centrally placed turret. The T-62s is a little bit more to the fore end of the hull, towards the front. It's a little bit crazy to see that the Russians are legitimately using 1960s and 50s era main battle tanks as mainline fighting tanks these days. It's a little bit nuts. It is showing y'all how short they are in terms of armor. They don't really have a lot left.
No, you're mistaken. That's just the Russian nostalgia. Like, they're very big into heritage. The Russians are all about family and all about, like, you know, the old times and stuff like that. So that's why they bring these old pieces of equipment out, because they're saving the best for last. The Russians are. Like, the moment the Russians decide to bring out that brand new stuff, it's so over. I tell you, it's over like immediately. Like, this is just for heritage right here. That's all.
Man, I remember legitimately, man, like 2.5 years ago when I was doing my capstone in college for my history degree, there were two people in the class that were telling me, funnily enough, folks, and this aged like milk, that I was wrong in saying that the war is going to be going on and Russia's already expended their best stuff. And oh no, the Russians are just holding their best stuff. Give it about another year and they're going to whip it out and steamroll the Ukrainians. And it's 2.5 years later. That never happened. So I was like, wow, these people, man, they were experts. And it was more so that politically motivated kind of analysis more than the straight up analysis where you actually know what you're talking about, or at least know how wars work, that kind of a deal. And I was like, yeah. So I was like, these people are about to learn how war really works. They never will, though. They'll just stay blissfully ignorant, because that's how people work. They never want to know that they're wrong or reassess their beliefs. They're just going to go with whatever they want to believe, and even if it's wrong, they'll still think they're right.
Could you imagine, like, seriously believing that a country that's at war, that needs to win the war quick to ensure their economy doesn't collapse, that they're, like, seriously just holding back the best for last? Could you imagine believing something that stupid? Like, that's what blows me away with Russian propaganda, is the stuff's not even really believable unless somebody's maybe, you know, a little bit, you know, goofy somewhat. It's like, if someone told me, like, for example, Vladimir Putin came out and said, well, you see, we're holding back the best because we want to ensure that we're holding up our heritage and we don't want to waste the best. It's like, well, why wouldn't you waste the best? It's not wasting it. You're fighting a war. Like, you obviously bring the best out. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I like the Russian propaganda mindset. Like, Russia's a cat playing with a mouse, like toying with its food, and it just does it for years because it's fun. It's like, That is not how this works. And it's also not a movie either where like the weakest henchmen go up first and get their ass beat, and then you go, oh, I was only just beginning. Like if you ever look at a real war, the most elite units are usually the ones used first, like they were in this war. Like that's usually how it goes. It's like I don't know how in the world people think otherwise. It's like that's just crazy. But anyways, with that, we are getting
The crazier part than that is if these people that believe that propaganda would simply do their research. There's literally a clip of Vladimir Putin before this war started. He was doing an interview with a Western outlet. I can't remember if it was NBC or which one it was, but the reporter was asking Putin as he was walking around outside somewhere in Moscow. They said, Putin, do you think you could win a conventional war against the West? And Putin said out of his own mouth, he said, no, we really couldn't. So that's why we rely on our nuclear defense. He literally said that out loud. And if the people had heard that and did their research, they would see, oh, okay, so Putin knows he can't win a war against the West. He said it out of his own mouth, which was pretty stupid to say that. And he knows he has to fall back on his nukes. And that's why he threatens them all the time. It's literally like right there in front of everybody.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. He said that multiple times, man, back in the mid-2010s. It's true. I mean, like, it's entirely true. If they didn't have the nuclear weapons, they would have gone the way of Saddam's regime decades ago. But we could see here the Ukrainians also hitting more Russian forces near Vasilivka. But I also just saw someone say they never sent out the Armada. Yeah, they never sent out the Armada because it was plagued with problems for its 10 years of prototype development after it was unveiled in the 2015 Victory Day Parade. And they finally discontinued the program and stated they were not going to be serially producing T-14s just last year. So that's the reason why the Armada was never sent out. It's mechanically unreliable in every single way. And that's the end of that clip, but great to see that they were able to knock out those vehicles. And with that, folks, it is time for us now to head on up into Odessa really quickly to show y'all the Odessans shooting down a shot. Take a look. They'll get it soon enough, buddy. Oh, they got it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. But it's time for us now to move on up into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1234 of the war news. Can y'all believe it, folks? A legitimate speech from Zelensky. This sort of thing is unheard of these days. We haven't had one for days. And so, without further ado, also, why does he look like Jimmy Fallon? Like the way he paused. Like, why does he?
I tell you, man, Zelensky's looking like he's tired. He just came back from his trip, so I mean that's probably why he looks like that. But he is looking tired.
Man, honestly though, I don't know why, but he looks like Jimmy Fallon. Like, doesn't he? Like, he kind of looks like him.
Nah.
Maybe. But anyways, without further ado, here's the speech. Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Коротко про сьогодні. Говорив з військовими, доповідали по фронту, по наших операціях. Вдячний всім нашим воїнам за стійкість. Ми працюємо зараз з партнерами над новим постачанням, над більшим виробництвом зброї в Україні та над більшим забезпеченням нашої армії. Є хороші домовленості, вже ми очікуємо ще домовленостей. Ми будемо працювати для цього наступними тижнями. Важливо реалізувати кожну домовленість якнайшвидше, щоб відчувалось реально, що є більше сил, більше засобів, більше захисту неба, більше систем ППО. І це ключовий пріоритет. Ми маємо політичні сигнали найвищого рівня, хороші сигнали, в тому числі від Сполучених Штатів Америки, від наших європейських друзів. За всіма доповідями постачання відновлено. Продовжимо працювати наступному тижні з американською стороною на військовому рівні. Зокрема, наші військові з генералом Келлогом. Ми готуємо і нові європейські оборонні пакети. Ми очікуємо найближчим часом сильних кроків і щодо санкцій проти Росії за цю війну. Тиск повинен спрацювати. Особливо я хочу відзначити сьогодні наших воїнів, тих, хто проявив себе найбільше за тиждень. Різні напрямки фронту, різні наші підрозділи, один надзвичайно важливий результат – це захист від окупанта. На нашій Сумщині 95-та десантна штурмова бригада. Дякую вам, хлопці. На нашій Харківщині 42-га механізована бригада, 92-га штурмова бригада, 13-та бригада оперативного призначення Нацгвардії «Хартія», які ефективно відбивають спроби росіян перейти у наступ. Дякую вам, хлопці, за стійкість у Вовчанську. Дякую 57-й мотопіхотній бригаді, Куп'янський напрямок, 3-я штурмова. Дякую вам. Торецький напрямок, 100-та механізована бригада. Молодці. Краматорський напрямок, 24-та окрема механізована. Дякую. Добропільський напрямок, 82-га десантна штурмова бригада та 1-й окремий штурмовий полк. Дуже дякую вам, воїни. На Покровському напрямку є за що відзначити 25-ту повітряно-десантну бригаду. І ще Новопавлівський напрямок, воїни 5-ї штурмової та 46-ї аеромобільної бригади. Дякую усім вам, наші воїни. Дякуємо всім, хто допомагає. І ще одне. Я очікую детальних звітів від урядовців, від команди Офісу по кожній домовленості з нашими партнерами, по кожному результату, який ми очікували. Що досягнуто і що досі на виконанні. Висновки будуть персональні, кадрові висновки. Слава Україні!
And Heroam
Heroam
Slava.
Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1, 2, 3, 4 of the war. I'm not even kidding. This is the only day, folks, that we're ever going to see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 in the stream. That's crazy, folks. That's crazy to think. That's a really unique kind of a number right there. And with that, it's actually time to round out this very unique day of news coverage and time for us to move on into the second part of the stream, which is where we get to talk to y'all. We enjoy it greatly, and we hope that y'all have enjoyed our stream so far greatly as well. If you have, we are happy that we were able to connect with all of y'all here in this amazing community and synergize with you all on the top breaking news stories of the day. If you have enjoyed our breaking news quite greatly, then I hope that y'all will subscribe and continue to be patrons of our show. It is a thing that we enjoy very much. You know what? Matthew, give me a corporate worded transition if you can somewhere. Give me a corporately worded one. I want it to be as corporate as possible. I want the soul sucked out of this. I want it to sound like we have absolutely no feelings at all, but I want to pretend like we do. I want you to get on that, Matthew, and I want you to find us an answer as to how I can do this as soullessly as I can. So we sound like every corporate channel that does this. Like, I want to find that out. But all jokes aside,
I would like to thank all the viewers for attending here on the channel tonight and being a part of this great grand community. If it weren't for you being a part of this great grand community, this channel would not have grown to the heights that it's gotten to today. We thank all of our shareholders very much for joining us here in this very important moment in the company, and we wish that you would all please have some of the hors d'oeuvres in the living room, and please help yourself to them, of course. We'll dock that from your paycheck, but thank you very much for joining us. And of course, if you'd like to have a piece of that Diet Coca-Cola over there on the fridge right there, it's not brand name Coke, because we can't give you that, but we can give you some great value Coca-Cola if you'd like some of that out of the fridge. But thank you very much for helping us during this great time in the company.
And we care for our employees greatly. Unfortunately, however, due to the terrible financial situations and the tough time that the company is in at the moment, we will not be able to allow for any raises or any compensation for any additional work. We hope that our employees understand that we're not just a company, we're a family, and we greatly appreciate all of y'all's hard work and sacrifice here in the workplace away from your families to make sure that we can all continue to stay in our jobs. In other news, I'd also like to tell you all about the company's record profits that we've made last year as well, which is a wonderful thing to hear about.
Wait a minute. You forgot. Before we talk about profits, because who cares about money when you have family, of course, in the company? We first have to synergize with the company values, first of all. And remember, our mission statement here is to look out for the shareholders amongst everything else. It's to make sure that the customers are taken care of perfectly well. That's the number one priority here at this company. Make sure the customers are well taken care of, and the shareholders, well, who are they anyway? But anyways, let's synergize, of course.
And wait a minute. You said that the company's going through tough financial times. They can't give us a raise, but the company's had record profits. How the hell does that work? Oh, of course, my wonderful employee. let me say this to you in a way that you'll understand. F you. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on into the question segment. All jokes aside. But we do enjoy the segment greatly. Getting past all the jokes I was trying to make about making it sound as soulless and corporate as possible. We absolutely love having y'all here, and we hope that y'all stick around for this question segment, because lately we've been having some insanely good rabbit holes in the question segment. People bring up good points, or there's a really interesting topic that comes up. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. So, stick around. We don't know what we'll be talking about or covering tonight in the question segment, but for all intents and purposes, the news is over. Just to let y'all know. So if you're expecting more news from this point, don't. And if you're going to say, where's the news? That's like asking where the beef is after the hamburger's already been sold. The news is over with. It's the first 2 hours of the show. So with that, folks, we are going to be moving on into this question segment. And so what do we got, Matthew?
Now, the worst part about those corporate companies is corporate companies, that's a little bit redundant, but the worst part about those corporations is when they bring in the always smiling HR lady who always has a way of making everything seem like it's happy-go-lucky even when they said they're firing you. We'd like to inform you, sir, that today we're going to lay you off from your job, and we hope you can make the payments you've been relying on this salary for. And they're like, wait, what? That's right. We fired you today, sir. Thank you very much. And it's like they're always smiling no matter what, and they're acting like just completely detached from reality. That's the most dystopian part of a corporation, is that whole part of it. But I tell you what.
Oh, no, better yet. HR is serving as pretty much the company's shield. You don't go to HR to say, man, I'm not really getting along with my boss too well. If they hear that, oh, is that right? They go and tell your boss, and then they have you fired probably within the next few days, and they'll do it in the most corporate way possible.
If you mention the boss to the HR lady, then it turns from, oh, I'm sorry, what problem did you have with the boss? It goes to, you don't have a problem with the boss. Oh, sorry. Okay, no problem with the boss, I guess. No problem there. Oh, man.
Geez, I gotta tell y'all, folks. If I don't hate anything more than something else, I absolutely hate corporate culture. Corporate culture is the worst. It is the fakest. The whole culture exists around being as fake as you possibly can be, while also pretending to be sincere. And it's the most see-through thing ever. I honestly think, folks, it would be a lot better for companies to just say, we're not a family, we're here to make money, and just be straight up about it. I feel like that, honestly, I would take that a lot more better than them trying to pretend like everyone's a family, because no one is. Everyone's just trying to get paid. So it's better to just go with it like that. You're here working because you want to get paid. We're running this company because we want to make money. So let's all be on that understanding instead of the whole bullshit we're a family thing, because it's we're not. And I'm just here to get paid. That's how I always was whenever I worked at those places. And it was so stupid because they'd say stuff like, we're a family, so if you ever want to, come up to us with a question and we'll try and help you out. I remember the one time they actually went out of their way to do that stupid crap. They started cutting down my hours to the point I was getting 15 hours spread over 5 days of the week. So I was coming into work 3 hours at a time. It was costing more money to get to the workplace than it was me making money at the workplace. So I went up to the manager and I said, hey, I just gotta say really quickly, I'm only scheduled 5 days, 3 hours a day. There's gotta be some way that y'all can manage where I just get more hours on fewer days. And so they said, well, that's tough. You're gonna have to figure that out. And I said, oh, okay. I clocked out and I said, here, I'll tell you how I figured it out. I quit. And I just walked out instantly. Because that was such a messed up thing. I literally told him, I was like, it's costing me more money than it is to get here and work that I'm making here. There's got to be some way to work this out. And I was
lived for company culture. That's why I became the manager.
man, I gotta tell you. But
Oh man, I'll tell you
I
what.
wasn't taking it. I wasn't taking it. And also like Bilge's myth said loyalty to a company is stupid. Loyalty is stupid to a company that has no loyalty to you. But if a company actually does show that it has loyalty to its employees, then I think it's totally fine to be loyal to that company. Like, you know, like if a company goes out of its way to actually take care of its employees and treat their employees well, I don't think people should trample on that, because that's how you end up getting a company that does not care for their employees. But if the company doesn't care for their employees in the first place, you shouldn't care for the company. There should be no loyalty to the company because they're not giving you anything in return. So what's the point of
I worked
having
for a better
loyalty for them?
company than you. I didn't go for that company. You went for one that was real corporate. And I was like, I don't want that. I've already dealt with it. So I went for more of like a mom and pop shop type of thing, and it was way, way better than what you were dealing with. And I'd already dealt with that, so I knew what it was. I was already 10 steps ahead of you on that. So I was like, hell no, I'm not doing that. So I went the other route, and it actually worked out a lot better.
Yeah, I would agree. Like the mom and pop shop or the small businesses, like the legitimate small businesses, not the ones that are legally classified as a small business because almost everyone is. Those are the actual businesses you want to work for. Because not only are they nice to their customers because they have to be, or else they're going to be out of business. They also are nicer to their employees. Anything that is a large corporate company, like, you know, like a large grocery chain, which is the particular thing I was working at that point, those are terrible. Those suck. It's a giant machine, and you're just a tiny cog in it. You're not an actual part that counts. So you know that. Ugh. But Matthew had a much better time at his job than I did at mine. Mine was terrible. But anyways, with that, it is time for us. And I say job singular. We had multiple jobs before we ended up doing YouTube. So you know that is what it is. But anyways, with that, we are on into the questions. What do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
And also, Cold Start said that's rare and they have loyal people. It's true. The place where I worked before I got on YouTube and started doing this, it was actually a mom and pop place. And I won't say what the name of the place was. It's actually regional in the South. And I was actually hired as the manager or the assistant manager at the place, like right off the bat. And I had like barely any work experience. So I was like, oh, that's a good sign right there. So I jumped into that, and I was like having to be involved in like the hiring part of it. The generally speaking, once you hired somebody to that, they were very loyal to the company because as long as you treat it, obviously, like it's common sense. If you treat people right, they'll stay. But if you treat people like cogs in a machine, they're going to be turning people over quite often. So we never had that problem. So that was quite a good part of it. And also, it's a lot more laid back. It's not fake, and that's why small business is so much more important in the country than huge corporations, because it's easier to work at places that are small business, and it's also a lot easier for people to relate to them as well. Because it's not just like corporate, you know, just what is it like corporate? What's the way to describe it, Enforcer? Like, what's the
Corporate
best way to
culture.
say it? Like cookie cutter, I guess you could say.
Um,
Corporations are cookie cutter, basically.
it's I would say it's more so inhuman or soulless. That's probably the best way to describe it. Because like they
Yeah.
have like this fake level of humanity about it, but then there's none in the actual system when you get beyond that fake level of human that they try and give to it. You know, because like here's one thing I think people ought to be straight up about. Everybody knows, like, you don't have to sugarcoat something. And I always find this stupid in the hiring process these days. People go, "Why do you want this job?" Because I want money. Like, I live in a country where you have to make money to pay the bills. That's why I want this job. Like, I'm not trying to get the job to become a part of your company or to, you know, get along with everyone and raise a family with my coworkers. That's not what I'm here for. Like, let's just be honest here. I'm here to get paid. Like, you know, I can generally do this job fairly well. So you want me or not? You want to pay me or you do not want to pay me? What's the answer here? Because I think
I
it's
said that. I said that in job interviews, by the way. I actually said that straight up. I think that's part of the reason why I think I endeared to people a lot quicker. I didn't say it crude like that. I just said, like they said, well, why do you want this job? And I would literally say, well, I'm in college. I'm trying to pay for my tuition. That's literally as simple as it gets. And I would say also, like, I think I'd fit well in the job as well. And it was literally as simple as that. And I didn't go through all that BS that they tell you to say, like in these like people that try to coach you for interviews. I didn't do that, and I think that actually went well because it was memorable. Because they're like, well, damn, he just like outright said the way it is, like what he felt. So that's kind of unusual. Most people will give the BS answer, but I didn't. I think that's what sort of stood out.
Man, I actually did that on the last job I had at that restaurant. Like I actually did that one time. But before that I did it the other way. Like I always said, oh well, I always like this store or this place. And the last one I was like, this is so stupid. I said, look, to be honest with y'all, I've never heard of your restaurant before. But I'm looking around to try and get a job to, make some money so that way I can pay my bills. And this seems like a good place to do that. And I got hired. Like they were like, yeah, you can start working immediately. I was like, oh, cool. I was like, wow, that's so easy. Just being honest with them instead of coming up with this BS answer that everyone else always tells you to. Because look, I also find it stupid that companies have like mission statements. Like a grocery store has a mission statement. Like it's like, this grocery store exists at its basic level to provide citizens with raw amenities and also foodstuffs and items that they need to get through the next week. So what's the point of the store having a mission statement? Like our mission statement is to get shit in our doors, on shelves, and then to get it out in shopping carts. That's the mission statement of this company. Why in the world do people pretend like you've got to align with some stupid mission statement? Like, I want to synergize with the community and create a better place. You're selling groceries. Like, it's like, there is no synergizing with the community. You're letting people buy their food and toilet paper and stuff. It's that basic. Like, you're just trying to provide them with their basic needs. That's the real mission statement. So just go with that. Like, be like, I just want a job and I want to get paid and I'm fine working here. And I will be nice to people so that way they'll come back and keep making this company money. And then you go, okay, you got the job. Like, that's just a, like, straight up kind of deal that I would be more so for than the BS stuff that exists nowadays, where everyone's got to be fake and lie about everything, or what you're really looking to get a job for. Because like with this, for example, when we hire someone, because to be honest with y'all, it's coming around the pipe that we're eventually going to have to hire someone else onto the team. Like our little team of people, that's not just Matthew, me, it's going to be a third person out there eventually. Like when we go through the hiring process, I don't want them to sit there and go, I really like your company and your channel, and I really like the way y'all present your stuff. Like, I really wouldn't care. Like, what I would really more so care about is them saying, I need a job and I'm really good at what I do. Like, that would be something I would appreciate a lot more than they like our show. Because it's like, you like it, the show, that's wonderful. But at the same time, I want you to be good at what you do. And, if you're good at that, and then I'm going to pay you. It doesn't really matter if you like what we're doing or not.
Interviews are mainly intended to get a read on the person's personality and their like temperament. That's why you'll have companies ask questions. And what's goofy is it's like entry level positions will ask like these high level questions these days. Like if, for example, just to take an example, if you go down to like the local like fried, like let's say like Chick-fil-A or something like that. If you go down there, they'll ask you like an interview question like, tell us the last conflict you dealt with and how you dealt with it and how you came out on top. And it's like I'm working at like possibly like the fast food joints. Like why are we getting this deep with it? But that's a decent question to ask though if you're trying to get a read on somebody's temperament, like for like a real like career job, is to ask somebody that, because the answer they give is very revealing if you know what you're looking for, and it's quite fascinating to hear people that are like really good interviewers ask these people these questions and then pick up on the little nuances to it that tell you, okay, that person's a narcissist, this person is a team player, this person is not a team player, and you can tell like through their temperament and their facial expressions if they're telling the truth or they're just giving you a BS answer.
Yeah, I would guess that would be one of the good reasons. But then again, man, like they'll sit there and say, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" It's like, I don't know. It's like
Hopefully.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's like I have no clue. And also, someone said, well, what like. Would you like to hear that from a fan that they enjoy what we're doing? Of course, because that's great to hear. But if someone's working for the company or they're looking to get hired, like if they like it, it doesn't really matter, because it's like if they suck at doing what they're trying to get hired to do, it doesn't matter how much they like it. That doesn't change the fact they can't do their job. Like that's really how that works. Because sometimes you do things you don't like to do. Like me personally, I didn't like working as a cashier at a grocery store. Like that isn't anything I really wanted to do. But
You're a cashier.
You're a cashier. You're a cashier. But I did it because I needed to get paid. It's like you don't have to like it. And I was still good at the job. Like I would smile to people, chit chat with them, check out their stuff really quickly. I was good at the job. Did not like it once. And that's fine. Like you don't have to like everything you do. Like you just have to get on and crack at it. and be good at the job. That's all. But still, like, it would be great if they like what we do and they like our content and stuff, but at the same time, it's more so important to be proficient at the job, so that way it's justifiable to be paid, and paid extra on top of that after you've been around for like a year or two. That would be the more important
No
thing to me.
paying extra. No paying extra. Go ahead and rule that out.
Oh yeah, we don't do bonuses around here or raises. Hell no. but anyways, that I'm just kidding, by the way, folks. That's obviously something you would do. That's just being nice. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on to the rest of our questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so jumping back on the topic here, and jumping back into our super chats, this one goes to Andrew Barbro, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that support very much, and we appreciate that. He said, good morning, and good evening, and good night. Oh, well, thank you. He said, how was your day, gentlemen? And take one from the chat. LSA forever. Honestly, it was pretty good. It kind of thunderstormed where we're at a little bit today, so a little bit rainy, a little bit flash floody, kind of like the entire country at this point, but it went pretty well, honestly. It wasn't such a great day for some in the country, but it was a good day for us. But thank you very much, Andrew. I hope your day was good too. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you for the support, Andrew, and I gotta say good morning, good evening, and good night to you as well. And as far as my day went, it was pretty good. I just kind of we kind of wandered around a little bit. There was a thunderstorm, and then beyond that, I was supposed to make a video today, and then I wasn't really happy with the amount of news that was out at that point in the day, so I didn't make one. But generally, the day was all right. It was just kind of counting down the hours to get to work. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you massively for support and helping this channel to keep running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help it to keep on rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, Ms. Disa said, I need a raise, Matt. Well, there's a ladder. You can get on the ladder if you need to get taller. There's go up a couple of steps and you get a little raise that way, I guess. I'm not sure what you mean. A raise? I'm sorry. It's I would have to get the dictionary for that. But anyways, our next one here goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, for that $30 support. We appreciate you very much, a longtime channel legend. And Marion said, as old as I am, I learned so much from you guys each and every evening, and thank you very much.
And thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemer, and thank you for the kind words and the compliments. We try our best here, and it's very interesting to hear that you learn a lot, probably about the Kuznetsov, because that was probably like one of the biggest things I talked about tonight, is I went on and on and on about the Kuznetsov. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one. But a big thanks to you so much once again.
And our next one goes to Jocelyn White, who puts in 20. And thank you very much, Jocelyn, as well, for that support. And she said, thanks in LLT, LSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army. And a big thanks to you for the support. And thank you for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, Jocelyn White, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. So a big thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Jody Mandelias, who puts in a 20. And thank you, Jody, very much as well for that support. And Jody said, thank you as always for keeping us up to current date. And LOC, LOC, LOC. And take a question, please.
And thank you for the support, Jody Mandelias. And I gotta say, thank you for enjoying us, keeping you all up to date. I thank you greatly for appreciating that. It is a little bit crazy, actually, to think that we are pretty much the only channel on the internet that covers world news on a near daily basis every day. I don't think a lot of others do that. I don't really think many others do that. And I got to thank you so much for appreciating that and supporting it, because you're helping us to stay on air each and every day with that kind of support. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that addresses that well. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and we will make sure to get one from the chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the one from the chat is going to go to none other than Buddy P. Moon. He said, what are the known current states of Russia's submarine fleet?
The known current state is bad. Beyond the Kilo class submarines, which are somewhat new, the rest of them are in deteriorating condition pretty badly from what we know. So, the general offset of most submarines, except for the diesel-electric Kilo class, is terrible. And the Kilo class submarines are doing somewhat okay. So I hope that does address that live chat well, at least on the general overview of what the sub-fleet is looking like currently. But I do thank you so much for the support and sponsoring a live chat, Jody, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to J.C. Atkins, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, J.C., for that support. They said, why do you young men not say the U.S. president's name? I do not understand. The basic reason why is because we do not name off the politicians, because once we name them off, It's like saying like a code word for some people. They go berserk, they go crazy, they go political, and it triggers people, literally. We do that with all the presidents, generally speaking. We don't say any of their names if we can avoid saying it. Sometimes we slip up and accidentally say it, but we try to avoid it because, like we said, it seems to trigger people. And also we try to stay apolitical as possible and just try to refer to the positions instead of the people. But Enforcer, what say you?
That's generally the answer. Recently, I've actually been saying the names of the presidents, but the thing is that it's really hard because some people, not a lot, but some people, have this issue to where if you say a name, they are triggered like Manchurian candidates or sleeper cells. Like it's like, you strap them down to the table and you whip out the book and you're like, fire truck, caboose, red, ice cream, and then they go crazy. It's like that. So like if I say, for example, Trump or Biden, people are going to get raged. Like just from the mention of the name, people go irate. Like they do. So we've got to keep it on the down low. And usually whenever I've done that recently, like with the Houthis, I'll say, Biden and Trump have done these things. They're identical and they're the same. And even still, I keep it very neutral. I don't differentiate and say this guy is better than this guy. I only bring up their names very rarely, and it's only been recently to go, these are the time frames we're talking about. These are the exact presidents and administrations we're talking about, and they did the same thing. And it's not even trying to elevate one over the other because we keep it completely politically neutral here. And then some people don't like it when we, and this is something that's been going on since the dawn of time. People don't like it when we sit here and criticize a current president's foreign policy positions, which is not from a political perspective, it's entirely from an analytical perspective on strategy and national security. And so we'll sit there and say something like, for example, with the last president, which would be Biden, we don't like the Chinese balloon flying over the country. And back then, we were called raging MAGA Republicans because we criticized Biden a couple of times. And then in the present day, we've criticized Trump's positions on foreign policy in the Middle East, and then we're called crying liberal snowflakes. And it's just ridiculous because our analysis has always been the same for years. Like, it doesn't matter who's the president. If something's not a good move, we say it's not a good move. It doesn't matter the political affiliation or what. But then people want to sit there because the current president is a Republican and they're going to be for the next 4 years, and the last one was a Democrat through their whole term, and we have to criticize them and their actions overseas because they're not good. It doesn't matter whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. And then people hear, oh, they have made one criticism against my beloved great leader. They are obviously the enemy of my party, and they are in the opposite political party, which is not the case. It's just that we do that on everyone. So,
Wait a minute. I see here, Henry in the live chat said, you have to pick a side these days, bud. No, you actually do not. Why do you think you have to pick a side? That's my question to you. To anybody that believes you have to pick a side these days, why do you think that is the case? That's my question, because a lot of people believe what Henry just said. They believe, well, we live in such a polarized time these days, you can't be in the middle. You must either go this way or that way, or you're nobody. It's like, where did you come up with that assessment? Because you've learned that from somewhere. I believe you've learned it from social media. That's where I think you've learned it from. And a lot of people unfortunately believe that, and that's not a good thing to believe, because you don't have to be one way or the other. And you're basically letting other people dictate what you do, which tells me that you're not fully in charge of yourself at that point, which is not a good way to act either. So I don't know. That's just not a good way to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's not at all. And I don't get it because the thing is that if you have to pick a side, we never have, and yet this channel is one of the most successful in this category. So it's generally showing that that's not the case. You do not have to be an inherently political person and pick a side to make it in anything. Like, you don't. And I also would find that to be very limiting, because if, like, let's go with, well, there's a million examples that I can make for both political parties where you're in that group and then your opinion changes 5 times on one topic for no reason. Like, and it doesn't make any sense at all. Like, there's a baseline logic to something, whether it's a good idea or not, and then you have to change your opinion 5 times, literally just 180s endlessly, because the guy at the top, whoever that is in either party, is saying that it's something different now. Like, for example, with the current party that's in charge, recently they've hated on Ukraine. Oh, they're just scammers. You know, like that's like generally the thing that's been going on. Now recently all of them are big fans of Ukraine all of a sudden. What changed? Nothing changed. Like the situation in Ukraine is the same as it was when they said that all Ukrainians are scammers. The only thing that changed is that the guy at the very top of their party right now said that Ukraine's actually the good guys now. So all of their opinions take a 180 and it's not even based on anything. Like I would honestly have a lot more respect for them if they just stayed anti-Ukrainian just because they had some sort of running logic that there wasn't a reason to support Ukraine. But the thing is that they're not thinking with their heads. They just want to be in the group. So if some guy says Ukraine is worth supporting now they take a 180. Zelensky's no longer a crook. He's a good man. He's always been a good man. It's just that they happen to call him a crook and wanted him dead for the past 3, you know, like that sort of a deal. And that's something that I'm not really for. And it's the same thing with the other party as well, because I was speaking about the Republicans. There's the same thing with the Democrats, is that you end up having that on other stuff, like, for example, when the October 7th massacre happened in 2023, all behind Israel. And then just a couple of months later, then everyone's against Israel in that party. And it's like, I don't really know how in the world that works, because it's like the running situation in all of these areas of the world is the same at all times. Some things change, and what we have to react to changes a little bit, but generally the underlying sort of a logic or the sort of a situation that we're dealing with, it's still underlying at a base level the same. So the answer is almost always the same. We're either dealing with our enemies or something along that line, and that's the baseline. And for some reason, it changes from day to day. Like I remember way back in the early 2020s when there was this big thing going on. It was kind of like a plague of a sort. Everyone's opinions were taking 180s depending on who was in charge about that situation. Like it was crazy to watch. That was actually the time that because before that, folks, just to explain this, I was actually very, very big into politics and being a partisan person before 2020 and 2021. And then watching what happened through 2020 and 2021, I completely hopped out of being a very partisan political person because I realized that none of it has any logical sense to it. And people just say stuff, not because they believe it, not because they understand it. They just want to be in the group. And that's kind of how it works. I wish I could talk about that a little bit more. I wish YouTube would allow us to, because that one thing, I'm sure many of y'all know about it, that happened in 2020 to 2021, if you paid attention, everyone flipped their sides. Like, I remember it. Like, I remember that there was this... What?
You think when you say like they flipped their sides, I didn't see any side flipping. I saw a universal push toward one thing for the first time in a very long time. That's what I saw. What I saw was a psyop, basically. I think most people that are analysts also saw that as well. It was basically a psyop, in my opinion. It was a lot of manipulation going on. Whether or not you believe it was right or not, it was a hell of a lot of manipulation going on. And it seemed like people was like, free will was being overridden.
So I'm really quickly, I'll go over it, but I'm not going to mention the thing. I'm just going to say what was happening. So there was this thing that came from China, and it came into America, and there was an issue that started to pop up in the first months of 2020, like towards like March and April and stuff. And there was a Chinese New Year's parade that was going to be held in New York around that time. And the Republicans were saying, they should shut that down, break that up. Everyone needs to go hide in their houses because this could end up being a problem, that this Chinese thing might spread through this crowd. And so then all of the Democrats said, oh, no, that can't happen. You're crushing people's freedoms. And then it came over here. And then the party that was in charge started working on trying to fix this Chinese thing. And they said, we're close to having a fix. And then the Democrats said, we can't trust the fix because it was made by the Republicans. Then the new administration came in, which was Republican. And then everyone wanted the new administration came in that was Democrat. And they said the fix, it has nothing to do with the Republicans now, but the fix is good and everyone's going to have the fix. And then the Republicans immediately flipped. Instead of having everyone hide in their houses, which is what they were originally advocating for, now no one needs to hide in their houses. Everyone needs to get out on the streets, and the fix isn't a good fix. Although it was a good fix when the last guy was doing it. And that was when I was like, everyone just flipped on a 180 here, literally from the opposite of what they were saying 6 months ago on all ends, because of no reason. Like, there's no reason to it. They just did it. And then that was like politics, like the political game that a lot of people keep getting themselves tied into is a stupid game, because it's one where you're just trying to be opposite of the other group just because the other group has one set of beliefs. So you're just going to take the complete opposite, really just to be a contrarian, because you don't want to agree with those people because in their mind they have some sort of a deep-seated hatred for that other group. And that's what I was like, I can't, like, I'm not going to be a part of that anymore. That's when I completely separated from the whole political thing, and I was like, this is just pointless. Like it's pointless to be involved in it and to be invested in it and to act like that there's any real meaning to any of it, at least as far as like getting entrenched and being like the red or the blue team is the perfect team. It's not. Like, there's a lot of flaws with both of them, and it's better to just try and assess them election to election and figure out which one's better or worse each election and have more of a free mind about it. That's what I go with. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Patricia TK, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Patricia, for that support. They said, a humble, lower income elderly couple who love you and wishes there was a bunch more zeros to this, and Stephen too.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Patricia TK. And we are happy for any support. Any support is great support, and I got to thank you so much for it because you're helping us to keep this thing running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep it running, and we wouldn't be able to make it possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I don't know why people keep saying this, but Green TK said in the live chat, am I the only one who thinks Enforcer Matt sounds exactly like Alternate History Hub YouTube channel? So many people have said that. I don't know why that is. I wouldn't run a second YouTube channel or something secretly on the side, folks. I mean, what makes y'all think that? But no, I'm not that guy, by the way. He's totally separate. He's not me. But there is actually another YouTube channel out there that I actually was a part of. That is still out there. I'm not going to tell y'all where it is because it's some old content I had and things like that. So it is on YouTube. Some people might be able to recognize me from it, but I'll just leave it at that. Maybe one of these days when I get back into that content, maybe I'll tell y'all about it, but it's out there. It's nothing bad, by the way. It kind of like, it sounds like I'm alluding to something bad or something. It's just like car content, motorcycle content, stuff like that. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Chris Guillory, or I think Guillory. Hopefully I'm not butchering your last name, Chris. I have a feeling I am, but thank you very much for that $20 support. And he did not leave a comment, though. He just left a $20 support, and we appreciate that very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, thank you for the support, Chris Wheelery. And thank you so much for enjoying our channel and helping it to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Pagetto666, who puts in a $14 donation. And thank you very much, Pagetto, for that support as well. And it said, good job, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. And it's like a nice, tricky live chat question. And click the like button, folks, and LSA.
And thank you for the support, and thank you for enjoying the work we've done tonight, Pagetto. We greatly appreciate your support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we will make sure to get that spicy, tricky live chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question goes to Riley W., who said, question for you both. How long do you think a war with North Korea would last if China did not intervene?
It would probably last less than a year, because the North Korean military, if we remove nuclear weapons from the scenario, the North Korean army is worse off than Saddam's armies of Iraq were in the Gulf War. So they would easily be defeated. There's practically no morale, no cohesion. They're starving. You could literally, like, this isn't even a joke. This is the truth. You can just offer them square meals, and that will get a lot of people to defect. Because that's actually a huge issue on the North Korean border. If you ever hear of the defectors from the State Security Service of North Korea, they say that one of their main jobs is to sit there and watch the border guards. And if they start staring off into the distance and they start talking about how they're really hungry, they generally know that those people are about to defect. So then they imprison them, torture them, and then send them to a political prison camp. It's a real issue because there's not a lot of food in North Korea. So you could actually get a lot of them to surrender just by offering them good food, or saying if you surrender, you will actually get 3 square meals a day. That would be shocking to a lot of them. They never heard of that before. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least as far as what it would go in North Korea. It would be over in less than a year. It wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be over in days or minutes. It would take a little while because we'd have to soften them up with airstrikes, and that takes time. And then the offensive would have to push in, and there might be some resistance in some places, but generally I think it would collapse about as quickly as Iraq would in 1991. But I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support. And also, I saw some people taking offense to what I was saying about not being political and the reasons why back in the day, and some people were like, you obviously don't know what happened. I was alive when it happened. Like, I watched it happen, and I think a lot of people are saying that because they don't want to think that their political party could have ever done something that was right or wrong or completely taken a 180. But the truth is, folks, is that they did. I was there to see it. Like, I was actually, like, believe it or not, I was actually trying to run for a political position during that time in my hometown, and I watched it happen, and I was just like, wow. Well, first off, I got screwed by the people who said that they were supposedly in the same political group I was in, got screwed by them. And then secondly, I watched both parties take a 180 on everything right after the November elections were over. And then I was like, okay, this is all BS. And then that's the reason why I'm not a big fan of getting heavily invested in a political group, because the truth is that they'll screw you over if it means that they're going to get a little advantage from it. Even if you're a diehard supporter that would lay down your life for that political party, they would take advantage of that. They would let you get killed if it meant it helped them out a little bit. So I'm just not really a big fan of supporting groups of people like that, like, at all. Like, I more so understand that that's the kind of transactional relationship they have with their supporters. So I like to have a transactional relationship with the political parties. If they're not providing me an inherent benefit, I'll go vote for the other political party just for the fact of spiting the other one and teaching them a lesson and pretty much whipping them in line. That's the way I look at it. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ricky Buffalino. And I know that last name, but thank you very much, Ricky, for that $100 support. And we appreciate that very much. That is massive support right there.
Dang.
And we do appreciate that very, very much. And sadly, there is no comment left by Mr. Buffalino, but thank you very much for that. And also, by the way, without saying exactly, I would be curious to know what state you're from. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you for the support, Ricky Buffalino. And I got to say that it's wonderful that you massively support this channel. You didn't throw in a comment, but we're still greatly appreciative. And also, speaking of what state you're from, I think Matthew's asking because he's thinking you might be from Utah. It's actually really cool to see that us picking Enforcer HQ 3.0 is almost like the Olympics picking where the next city is going to be that hosts the Olympics. Because I saw a lot of people who were from Salt Lake City in the chat recently, and they were like, yeah, they're coming here. It's like the Olympics is coming to Salt Lake City. It's really cool. And hopefully we'll be able to meet some of you all out there, because we've met a lot of folks who support the channel and enjoy it here in Alabama, and hopefully we'll be able to meet an equally amount of cool people out there in Salt Lake City. That'll be pretty neat. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And also, I just saw someone take issue with me saying I'll vote for the other party just to spite them, like the party that didn't do what I wanted. And then they said, no, you won't. You'll vote right or not vote. That's a really weird kind of a perspective to take. Which side's right? Considering that both of them get about half of the popular vote every year, there's clearly not a right answer to who to vote for. So also that really supports corruption, because you're saying that whichever party you support them so much that you're going to vote for them no matter what. So even if your representative was conning someone, it's better to have them than the other party. So it's better to have them than a Democrat or Republican or whoever you're for. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, like from a mindset perspective, because once again, that's where a lot of the corruption's coming from in this country. It isn't coming from the people, it's coming from the ineptitude of people, to be honest, like you, that won't look at those people and go, these are really scummy people, I'm not voting for them again. I'll go vote for the other party just to get this wacko out. And then if the other guy happens to also be a crook, then I'll vote for the opposite party that he's in just to get him out. And I'll keep doing it until we get a good person to represent our interest in this district. That's the issue with the country right now. It's not the corrupt politicians, it's the fact that voters keep voting in these corrupt politicians that keep supporting the system. Because there's always going to be bad eggs, but it's the lack of the system's wish or want to punish bad eggs that allows for these bad eggs to continue to persist. If police departments actually held officers accountable for their bad actions, there wouldn't be any bad cops out there to bring down the entire police force of the country. If there weren't any bad politicians out there because they kept getting voted out because people clearly saw that they were crooks and liars, there wouldn't be that many corrupt politicians. There would be a lot more honest politicians out there, or closer to honest politicians than crooks. If every single system worked that way, there wouldn't be heinous people out there all the time. But it's that kind of a mindset that keeps on bringing these people in on both ends, because you can see quite clearly that there's a load of crooks in both political parties that are just ripping the system blind, and they keep ripping the system blind because the supporters of those parties in those districts keep going, well, it's better to have this crook than it is to have that dirty Democrat or that nasty Republican. And that's the issue with the system. Like, if people would stop thinking that way and they'd actually vote honestly and vote sincerely instead of acting like we're a part of the Workers' Party of Korea, we would end up actually seeing that the political system would be far better off than it is now. Because if you notice, the crookery seems to be growing recently as people get more entrenched in their voting philosophy that they have to vote straight red or blue every election. You didn't see this kind of corruption back in the day when folks like FDR or Nixon or Kennedy could almost end up winning in veritable national landslides by the popular vote and the electoral vote, because people understood back then that the voters were smart, they were a lot more savvy, and if they didn't like someone, they were getting rid of them, hell nor high water. It didn't matter if the next person was a Democrat or a Republican. They were going to go, so they better try their best or they're going to be gone. Like, there is no guarantee that, well, we got a guaranteed base. There was no guaranteed base back then. And it worked a lot better. Like, there was actual regulation that counted. There was more accountability by the voters on their politicians. The politicians had more accountability to their voters. It was a much better system to work off of than the mindset of, you need to vote Democrat or Republican or you're burning in hell and you're a traitor. That makes no sense. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that well. And we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Philip Lamebull, who puts in a 10. And Philip said, you guys are really great.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And you're great. You're great for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. And so, a big thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a massive 101 Canadian donation from LC39A. And thank you very much, LC, for that support. And that is massive right there. And huge shout out to Canadian viewer as well. He said, whatever happened to CETO?
CETO was dissolved generally because it just wasn't a big thing. Like, it just lost diplomatic support, so it dissolved. We have something similar to this in the present day, but the name of it eludes me. Matthew, do you know what it's called?
You're talking about what are you looking for again? Tell me.
It's something similar to the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, but it exists. I just can't think of the name of it.
Let's see. The modern version of CETO. I'm going to pull it up actually, because I don't remember off the top of my head. Let's see here. CETO dissolved, and it was replaced with the ANZUS Treaty.
Huh?
Is that it?
I don't know. It's very similar sounding to CETO. That I do know. We have some sort of, there's like an economic alliance or something like that exists that's made up of Southeast Asian partner states, which kind of fills the. Yeah, it's ASEAN. There we go.
And also, by the way, Diane Merriam said at the exact same time I pulled it up, by the way, so credit to Diane for shouting that out.
This is kind of a similar, it's a spiritual successor to CETO in a sort. I also thank you, everyone, for bringing up the ASEAN name, because I'd be damned, I couldn't think of it. I was just completely eluding me. But this is kind of the spiritual successor, but it doesn't have the military or backing power that CETO had, because CETO actually had strategic global partners like the US, the UK, and France that were a part of it. And then we had member states in the area like the Philippines, Pakistan, technically, which is also the reason why a lot of the weapons that went to the Mujahideen during the Soviet-Afghan war went through Pakistan, is because they were a CETO ally and member. Well, and CETO had already dissolved by that point, but they still were considered to be in that similar sort of a realm, if you want to call it that. And then South Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos were also technically members of CETO as well. Although that's they weren't really like full-on members. So it was kind of like Turkey being a member of the EU. It's like a halfway house sort of a deal. But beyond that, this is kind of the spiritual successor. The issue, however, is that they do not have the kind of military backing or firepower that SEATO had. I think if we took the Association of Southeast Asian States, honestly, I really can't find a big issue with any of them. Burma's, war-ridden. That's one issue. But Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines are decently solid states. And not only that, they're pretty big economic players. All of them are major economic players, actually, in Southeast Asia. So it would be great to try and see if we could somehow incorporate the United States as far as military support goes into that organization, because I think that would be a great way to create a Southeast Asian united front against the Chinese, because the Chinese are threatening the territorial interests of pretty much all of these countries within the region, except for Burma and Thailand, in Laos and Cambodia. They're threatening Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines an extensive amount, as well as Brunei to a small degree. So we could probably try and do something to bring back the kind of force or treaty organization that existed in SEATO through ASEAN, but I'm not entirely sure if we could. But that's generally what happened to it. It was a lack of diplomatic support, and it was also due to the fact that this was kind of like a united force against the communist Chinese, and then Nixon went to China and everything, and then our relationship with the Chinese here in the West started to change significantly. That's also what led to the collapse of SEATO, because SEATO was generally like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but against the communist Chinese for the Philippines and a couple of other countries within the area at least. But then the thing was that if we were friendly with the Chinese, which started to happen around 1975, what was the point of a military alliance that was geared towards defending everyone against the commies, the commie Chinese in the area? So that was also the reason why it lost a lot of diplomatic steam, and then it dissolved in 1977, just 2 years after we opened formal relations with the communist Chinese. So I hope that does address that well. Great question, by the way, and I thank you for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running, LC39A, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and keep it running that make this thing a reality. So a massive thanks to you so much once again for the humongous support, and I hope that was also a pretty good answer to the question. So thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Doc54, who puts in a 10. And Doc said, while on board the USS Curtis Wilbur, we visited Vladivostok and were moored next to the Moskva, and all the Russian ships in the port were rusted and had been tied up for quite a while, and that was back in 2005.
And look at that, I actually found a picture of the Curtis Wilbur back in 2005, the year you were on it. I bet you were on the ship when this picture was taken. That's actually pretty cool. But yeah, let me go see. Let's see, Russian warships rotting. Let me go see if I can pull up a picture like that, because it was crazy to see the state that some of the... Oh yeah, this actually showed this to you. This is actually a picture from Vladivostok where you were at in 2004. And a lot of these ships just ended up rotting away in the port. This was a big issue, by the way, because they also let their nuclear submarines rot away in the port with their reactors still intact and operational on a lot of submarines. So the United States in the 90s actually paid the Russian government money to allow us to go into Russia and dismantle the nuclear reactors in some of their submarines because they didn't have the money to maintain them or upkeep them, which is something a lot of people don't know about. But it's really crazy to look at how bad of a state a lot of the Russian Navy was in. And this actually is, I think, their operational Kiev-class carrier, the Minsk. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. Actually, that's in China. The wrong one. Let me see if I can go find another one of these that was rotting. Here's one of their submarines that ended up capsizing in Vladivostok. This was in 2000. I need to find a picture of the nuclear submarines that were rotting, because there was actually a time that a lot of them were just rotting away in port, and it's really hard to find them. Here's another rotted out Soviet submarine. We dipped. It's really, really hard to find them. Really, really hard. Damn, I don't think I'll be able to find a picture of it, at least here on Google Images. But yeah, a lot of the Russian Navy was rotted out. And whenever you hear of the Russian Navy growing these days outside of the Kilo-class submarines, 9 out of 10 times is because they're taking one of these rotting ships and they're trying to push it back into service with minimal repairs and refits. So their Navy is in a terribly bad shape, because to keep a ship in service, it requires endless constant maintenance. Otherwise, systems are bound to fail. It's a huge vessel with millions of moving parts. Stuff will fail if you're not maintaining it endlessly. And that is something that the Russians certainly have not been doing. So I would thank you for the support. Also, thank you for sharing that interesting story with us that you were actually there in Vladivostok in 2005. But they are all in bad shape. And what's even crazier is that it's really bad for their ships to look like they're in bad shape. Because if y'all don't know this, this is something a little bit interesting. We use oil-based paints on our vessels here in the West, like the Early Burke. And this leads them to look like they're rusting. Let me see if I can get y'all another picture of a ship that looks like it's very rusted. Let me see here. There's got to be one, because usually the ships start to look pretty rusted pretty quick if they're not being cleaned regularly. Actually, I think the best way we can show that is on the Zumwalt. Let's see here. There's got to be a picture of the rusted up Zumwalt. Zumwalt rusted. Here we go. So as you're going to see here, the
man, that's looking tough.
Yeah, the Zumwalt looks like a rust bucket sometimes. You wouldn't believe this, actually. The current president of the United States in his last term was pissed when this picture came out because he said it made America look weak. But there's actually a reason why the ships rust like this, at least here in the West. We use oil-based paints. And oil-based paints, when they come into exposure with salt water a good bit, they tend to wear a lot quicker. On the other hand, other countries like Russia and Japan and pretty much everyone else in the world that isn't in Europe or in North America, they use lead-based paints, which are incredibly toxic, especially to the surrounding environment when the ships pass through. But they do not corrode or wear as quickly as our oil-based paints do here in the West that we use on our ships. So their ships don't look as rusted as quickly. So if their ships are rusting over, they're in very bad straits, and there's literally no maintenance being done, because Western ships rust really quickly. Like, very little exposure to the open sea for a very short amount of time, they rust. Russian ships, Japanese ships, and Chinese ships can go to sea for months on end and hardly look like they're worn out at all. They will look fresh when they come into harbor, even after months at sea, unlike ours. And that's because of the different base of their paint. Ours are oil-based, theirs are lead-based. Very toxic, but it does make the ships look better after being at sea for a while. And also, here's an example of other vessels with the oil-based paints that end up coming back to port looking like rust buckets because the paint wears really quick.
Yeah, it looks really bad right there. It really makes it look like it's crappy.
Yeah, but, you know, like, let's see.
It's better not to have brain damage, though. It's better to have a crappy ship than brain damage.
Yeah, you know, like, to get this Moskva ship, let me go get this. To get this kind of a clean sheen or a chic on your ship 24/7, you've got to take some neurological damage. Maybe that's why the Russians don't do that good, man. Maybe they're painting everything with lead. So they're, you know, going around and they're like, you know, some, blah, you know,
and also, it did bad because it sunk. That's another reason why it did bad.
Look, see, that lead-based paint did hold up well, though. Look at it. I mean, it's burned, and he's even holding up still fairly well. But, yeah, you know, I don't think making a ship look better justifies the whole using lead-based paint stuff. And I'm not really a green freak or anything, but I don't really like the idea of being on a ship that's literally coated in lead-based paint. That just sounds unhealthy. Like, as to an individual, not the environment, but to the people on board, that does not sound like it would be a healthy thing. Because, you know, all the inside of the ship's also painted with lead-based paints as well. So you're literally just breathing in trace amounts of lead in the air inside of a ship every day if they're painted with that kind of paint. And also, Sanfa said, isn't lead paint poisonous? Yeah, it's toxic, actually. Like, there's a small amount of lead that pretty much, like, sheds off of the paint, all the time. Very small amounts, but after being around it for a while, it will cause neurological damage if you're around it for years and years and years on end. But also, if you ever, like, this was a big thing back in the day, kind of like how microplastics are a thing. For boomers, it was eating lead paint chips. Like, they would eat those things like crackers, apparently. And, you know, eating lead, it literally puts the lead in your bloodstream, and then in your brain, it starts causing severe neurological issues. So, yeah, it's not a great thing to be around. But with that, I do thank you for support and helping this channel keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Chris Geary, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Chris, as well, for that support. Also, by the way, I had to swallow real quick there for a second. I had to
I was like, what's
chewing
the
a pretzel. I was dying there for a second. I was trying to, like, choke down that pretzel. But Chris said, Chris, I love you guys. Keep up the great work. And we need more Americans like you. And my family has finally found new members, we the people. And what's right is right, and that's at the end of the day. And we all know what's wrong.
I thank you for the support, Chris, and I thank you for the kind words, because that's generally the way I look at it. I look at it as we're all Americans. Like, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an American, and that's how I make my decisions off of. And also, people make that statement these days, but they're like, I'm an American, and that's why I vote Republican or Democrat. I'm like, that's not how that works. Like your loyalty isn't to the party, your loyalty is to the country. I don't like how the people put the party before the country these days. I think that's disgusting and very anti-American in my opinion. Because the right answer is right and what's wrong is wrong. It doesn't change because the guy at the top says it changes. The answer is right or it's wrong, and you stick with it until the finish. And if it's not a good answer, then you get voted out. Like, that's how I generally think it works. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army and long live the Republic. But a huge thanks to you once again, and we're on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from Nightmare Before Christmas. And they said China and Russia claim every boat with a pistol on it as part of the Navy as half of their tonnage and won't even make it out of port. I'm glad to see the propaganda about their floating scrapyards debunked.
And I thank you for the support. And yeah, it's a real rough situation out there, with the Russians and the Chinese. But I do thank you greatly for helping this channel to keep running. I would agree with you completely. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 super chat from Wantan Quadruple 8. And they said North Korea could just be acting as a weapons factory of sorts. China, Russia, etc. send in supplies, and North Korea pumps out shells, and they keep a percent of the supplies as the payment. No cash exchanges? What say you? That's my whole argument right there, Wantan. That's what I was saying earlier. That's my speculation on what they're doing, and that gives China some plausible deniability as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that on some things like ballistic missiles or anything that would require some sort of GPS guidance or coordinate guidance or anything like that, that probably is involved. But with raw high explosive artillery shells, which is what they provide the most, that I believe is entirely made inside of North Korea. I don't think that they require any Chinese support for that, because the North Koreans have been known for decades to be producing hundreds of thousands of artillery shells every year. So to say that they're just transferring all of that production from supplying their ammunition storages around the country to just giving all of them to Russia, I don't think that's really that much of a stretch. Because we've always been hearing for years, the North Koreans have such a large war industry. Their people are starving. They never try and work on that, but they will pump out shells. And at any given moment, if a war breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, the North Koreans are going to be firing tens of thousands of shells within the first week, because they're producing them daily, and they've been storing millions of them for decades. So it wouldn't be far off for me to say that most of the support that they are giving to the Russians is primarily made entirely inside of North Korea from the ground up, because most of it's very simple high explosive artillery shells. So I think generally Matthew and me would agree if we talked about advanced weapon systems like anti-tank guided missiles, ballistic missiles, and stuff like that. But the thing is that I'm saying off of the percentage of everything that they're giving the Russians, how much of that really has an origin at all outside of North Korea? The answer to that would probably be like 15% or 10%, which means that the overwhelming majority, which is the high explosive artillery shells, is made entirely inside of North Korea without any external support or help. And considering that there's a high dud rate there as well, it's showing that a lot of these shells are being pulled out of storage after they've been stored there for years, and some of their filler or their primers or fuses have fouled. And that's also showing that, once again, it's most likely coming from North Korea. Because if the Chinese were providing them, the dud rate would be lower because the shells would be fresh. But considering that there is a fairly high dud rate with the North Korean shells, it's showing that they've been in storage for a while, which once again heavily suggests that most, if not all of those, are coming entirely from within North Korea and have been domestically produced there. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, at least in my opinion. But I think Matthew and me are literally going to disagree on that until the end of time. But we'll see one day which one of us is right and wrong, and whoever is wrong, and whoever's right is right. It's not like a big deal or anything. But still, it'll be interesting to see which one of us does end up right on that. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Harry, who puts in a 10. They said between 1 through 10, out of a 1 through 10 chance, what chance do we have of World War III?
I would say about not to be a fearmonger, but I'd say these days is about a 6 out of 10 chance. Like, don't run your grocery store over that. Like run your grocery store, never. Like even when it gets to a 10 out of a 10 chance, civil order has to be maintained. People can't panic. We have to be calm because then that starts to throw all of the supply lines into shock. So just be calm. Just get what you need. Nothing more, nothing less. If a bad situation happens, no amount of preparing will really help you out. If you're going to get killed outright, you're going to get killed. So just keep calm. But I would say it's probably around a 6. So I hope that does address that the best I can. I do thank you for the support, and I hope that I hope that wasn't the answer you were looking for, but I think that it's getting way on up there at this point. Unlike what we've been saying for years, where it was a really low chance, I think that we're actually starting to get a good bit closer. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. But Matthew, what are you thinking?
Me personally, I would say 1 through 10 chance of World War III. I would say that we're getting a lot closer to it, like the enforcer's saying too. We're getting much closer, and the more these domestic political issues rise up, and I sound like a broken record on that these days, but I really do mean it. With China having an issue, the U.S. is having an issue, Russia's having an issue. All the major powers right now, and yes, Russia is still considered a major power, even though they don't have an aircraft carrier, and they suck. They're still, technically a major power. I would say with the domestic political crisis rising like that, Putin's facing an economic crisis, Xi Jinping's facing a legitimacy crisis, and the U.S. is facing its own little crisis going on. It's about to really take off here probably very soon. You're going to see all these different world leaders getting really testy with one another, and things are already heated, so that creates an environment for something to pop off that's really unfortunate. So I would say 1 out of 10. Right now, I would say it's about a 6, in my opinion. It's probably about a 6 out of 10 being the highest chance, 1 being the lowest chance. I would say it's somewhere around a 6 and slowly rising, in my opinion.
Oh, so we agree. We agree. But with that, I hope we both address that well, and we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Rye Guy SR, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Rye Guy, for that support. He said, I would think our oil-based paint helps with reflections as it's flat, and I would think the shine part is bad on open sea. And LOTLSA, take one from the chat, and Slava Ukraine.
And long live the Respring Army. It may be so. I think it had more so to do with us changing the paint, because a lot of our paints actually used to be lead-based here in the country until it was generally banned for oil-based paints. But I generally think the reason why we changed it was more for environmental and health concerns than any kind of tactical concern. But still, I think that may also be an added benefit to it. But I do thank you for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the live chat question they requested is going to go to none other than Little Bear, who said, didn't Russia have one on order from France before the Ukraine war? Aircraft carrier.
I don't think so, actually. Yeah, I don't think so, because the Ukrainians still would be the only ones who could have produced it, or the Chinese, and if they had one on order with the Chinese would still be building it, and they aren't building one. And if they had one on order with the Ukrainians, there would have been a semi-complete hull somewhere in Ukraine, and there isn't. So I would have to say I don't think they did. But I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Pretty Much Fitness, who puts in a 5. They said the Russians are scrapping the Kuznetsov. No, that thing's a meme factory.
Yeah, that thing is the meme machine, honestly. But it sounds like they're going to be scrapping it here soon, or announcing it's scrapping. But I do thank you for support. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from United Kempo Martial Arts Academy, who said, sell the Kuznetsov to North Korea, and they'll think it's the Millennium Falcon. They might.
Actually, they probably would. Like, the North Koreans, man, they would have that woman on the media, and she would be so excited. She would, like, she'd be talking like that. She would be absolutely...
Oh, the straight pipe! It pours the smoke out of the top of the ship like a straight pipe. That is so amazing. Thank you, great leader. Dude, so much for this.
Dude, Kim Jong-un sits in the bridge, and the whole ship gets a list. It just leans over to whichever side he's on. Oh, man. Dude, he would ramp up that throttle from the bridge, and that thing would be rolling coal out there in the Taedong River in Pyongyang, and he'd be, like, goosing it. Like, dude, it would be hilarious, honestly. Honestly, I think the Russians ought to give it to the North Koreans, because that would be hilarious, and it wouldn't provide them any sort of a real strategic value. So why not? I mean, that would be hilarious.
Oh, the great leader. He was such a great leader. He was rolling coal on the South Koreans daily. He brought out this ship and was rolling coal right down the coast. It was a magnificent sight, a beautiful sight.
Dude, like, honestly, I'm not lying, dude. It would be hilarious to see his fat face in the bridge of the Kuznetsov as it was rolling coal. I would die laughing from that image.
Oh,
Honestly, that would be one of the best ones ever. You know, and he'd be wearing that little, like, Southern planner outfit. Let me go find it really quickly. Let's see here. Kim Jong-un, but while I'm wearing the hat. The wide brim hat. Wide brim hat. Hell yeah! We got ourselves Colonel Sanders here. He's cooking up fried chicken in concentration camps. Look at him go. He's going to sit there and say, the North... Well, actually, we can't say the South because he's from the North Koreans. But the North will rise again with that stupid hat. Like, dude, he's wearing a freaking straw hat.
Yeah, I don't know why either. It doesn't really match.
Also, what the hell was that fit?
That right there... He looks like he just came in from like doing some yard work or something. That looks like me when I came back in from yard work. But I wasn't ever wearing dress pants out in the yard though.
This picture almost looks AI generated, honestly.
What's that guy doing on the left over there? He's looking shifty.
Bro, this guy looks like he's about to sell you a used car in a minute with that kind of
He really does, man. That look on his face is like real, like shady looking. And the other guy on the right's acting normal. And the guy behind him is too. That guy on the left though, he's like, somebody better keep an eye on him.
Dude. That hat was so stupid. What made him think that was a good idea to wear that hat?
I have no idea.
Bro, look at him. He's grabbing for the peanut butter like the lord he is. Bro, they had him reaching out on the conveyor to grab that whole entire plastic-wrapped, like, 12-pack of peanut butter. Dude, you couldn't have made the comedy rights and stuff. Also, by the way, that woman right there, you see that woman in the background?
Yes.
Would you believe it? That's his wife.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, it's his wife. Yeah, like if you look at his daughter, they actually share a striking resemblance to each other.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think she's from like the Arabong Electronic Ensemble or something like. She was their lead singer, and she was generally considered to be like the prettiest woman in North Korea, at least from what they say. And he ended up like pretty much forcing her to marry him. Like that's how it works over there, in North Korea.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So she's the first lady of North Korea. She's disappeared in recent years. Apparently, she's not like the attraction she was. And now he's replaced her with the daughter. And now she goes around with Kim Jong-un everywhere instead of her. Because, when you're not in public, you literally go into like a compound and hiding and you're not allowed outside and a whole bunch of stuff. But anyways.
Also, that is not his sister, by the way. His sister is a little bit more, Kim Yo-young. She's a little bit skinnier than that, and also she looks a lot more ghoulish. This is her right here. She's very brutal, actually. This one right here, very, very brutal. The wife was not brutal, if that was the wife in that picture back there. But this one right here, you got to watch out for this one.
Kim Jong-un wife. Yeah, see, that's her. Resold Jew.
Oh yeah, sure was. I didn't really recognize her in that last photo, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's her right there. And she's met Xi and a whole bunch of other people. Like, she literally is the first lady of North Korea, so she's traveled around a good bit. But Kim Yo-jong is unsettling. Let me see if I can get y'all some better pictures. She goes around everywhere smiling like a whack job who's like just invented Squid Game. Like she has like this smile on her. Like there's like maybe 100 North Koreans back home that right now are fighting like glazed in honey, like for a smoked ham. Like it's a really weird sort of a smile she's always got. There it is. It's that. She always has that on her face. Very weird look. Very disturbing, honestly.
She's got the makings to run the country. Like, she's the first female leader. She's actually got it in her to do it. She's a psychopathic enough to do it. She's willing to prove herself. Is that her?
Yeah, that's her when she first started to appear ever. This was like back in like 2013 or so.
Yeah, well, honestly, I think she has a real chance of actually taking over Kim's place if he croaks. Like, I think she's got a strong chance of it. It would be certainly the wildest thing that's ever happened in North Korean politics because in their culture, the women and male thing is not the same thing as the West. It's not the same at all. So that would be revolutionary to have a woman leader, especially North Korea. That would be a ground shaking.
Oh, there's that weird smile again. She's always got it on her face. I don't know what's up with it. She never is not doing that weird smile when she's not talking. She's very creepy. Like very, very creepy. And also
She's got in her.
she doesn't really talk a lot, and when she does, it's really choreographed, like at a plenum of the party congress, and that's like the only time that she really talks. So she's really mysterious. At least to from an external viewpoint. I don't know if that would translate into her being good at leading or not. But she sure is mysterious and creepy as hell, which generally fits the criteria of being a dictator in North Korea. So she fits the bill.
She didn't want to say very much because she don't want to overshadow Kim while he's still living, Kim Jong-un. And also at the same time, though, she don't want to say very much either because that keeps her unpredictable. So it's hard to get an intel read on her probably. So nobody can really know exactly what her real temperament is unless you have an asset close to her or something like that. They could actually get to know her personally. But just the image she's putting forward is like a psychopath. That's the image she's putting out there. But whether or not she's really that way in private or not, that's another story. But she seems like, at least if she was faking it, she's doing a good job faking the psychopath profile. Like she certainly comes across like it. And she seems like she would probably wipe more people out than Kim Jong-un just to prove herself.
And let's see here. I don't have a picture of Kim Jong-un's wife, but let me go pull up Kim Jong-un's daughter, and because you'll see the similarity between the wife and the daughter here. See, it's like a mini-me.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. It's like she took nothing from Kim Jong-un. But then again, I also forgot to mention to all of y'all, Kim Jong-un actually had a decent amount of plastic surgery when he returned back to North Korea, because the plan was to make him look more like Kim Il-sung. So that way it looked like he had more of like a direct lineage to Kim Il-sung than he actually does. So that's a bit of a side fact. So it would make a lot more sense that she would look nothing like Kim Jong-un, because even Kim Jong-un being, obese, he still doesn't look anything like he actually does. Let me go show you all a picture of Kim Jong-un as a kid. Kim Jong-un in Switzerland. Let me go get those pictures really quick. This is what he actually looked like while in Switzerland. This is a real picture of him, by the way.
Yeah, he used to play basketball. That's why he's such a huge fan. He was able to connect to Dennis Rodman so well, is because he was huge into basketball. And I think he even, like, when he was young, he dreamed of being a professional basketball player. But obviously that didn't work out because he had to come back to North Korea and go run that whole situation. But yeah, he lived a perfectly Western life and actually lived quite nice when he was a kid.
Yeah, he was returned back to North Korea at about 17 or so. And when he was returned back, that was a part of the grooming process to get him ready to take over the country when Kim Jong-il died. He actually had an older brother. It was Kim Park-ho, something like that. He got assassinated back in the day in like 2013 or 2014 or so. But he was the older brother, and Kim Jong-il actually passed him over in the line of succession to go with Kim Jong-un, because he believed that Kim Park-ho had absolutely none of the makings of being a leader. And he actually, according to someone who actually was close to Kim Jong-il, they actually said that he generally wanted, what's her name again, man? Park Jung-ho?
Kim Yo-young?
Yeah, Kim Yo-young, whatever her name is. I don't even think that's the name, but whatever her name is, the whack-ass. He wanted the whack-ass woman to be the leader of the country, but she was a woman, so, that puts her at a disadvantage in North Korea. So he picked Kim Jong-un because that was the best pick of the three. So he was returned back at 17. Sometime around when he returned, or when he turned 18, they gave him some plastic surgery to make him look more like Kim Il-sung. And let me go show y'all what Kim Jong-un ascension.
I'll tell you, that's scary to see him as a young person. He's skinny, and then to see him where he's at currently, where he's obese. That's scary, man. Because honestly, that's I'm kind of like a little bit slim right now myself. That's my worst nightmare right there. Is all of a sudden, just one day you wake up and all of a sudden you're I'm gaining tons of weight.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Honestly, man, I think he's gaining tons of weight because he probably hates the job. He's like stress eating or something, maybe. But I'm trying to find a picture of him when he first became the leader of North Korea. Because he actually looked totally different than even he does now. Kim Jong-un funeral. This might be a good example. Where in the world is the pictures of... Here we go. Actually, no. That's not the right one, I do not believe. Actually, I think that might be. But you can see here, between his face here, he did get noticeably larger already, but you can also see that his facial structure is just slightly different in some areas, like the cheekbones and stuff, because they were trying to make him look like this. like Kim Il-sung, who had a generally rounder face. So they were trying to make him look as close as they could as possible when he first became the leader of the country to Kim Il-sung. So he was almost like, the sun-faced leader, he's back, because that's the big thing. Kim Il-sung is worshipped as a god in the country, and while Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un are his descendants, they don't have the same kind of aura or gravitas around them. They pretty much hold their legitimacy, not just from being a Kim, but also being the descendants of Kim Il-sung, which literally means, in Korean, Kim Il-sung means Kim brings the sun. The holiday they have for Kim Il-sung is called the Day of the Sun, meaning the day of Kim Il-sung. So just to give you all a little bit of some knowledge about Juche ideology and all that sort of stuff, but really interesting sort of a thing. North Korea is a very interesting subject to study because there's not really a lot known about it, and we generally have to try and piece everything together over decades to get a good picture of what even Juche ideology actually looks like in its real practice form. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have another super chat from Ricky Buffalino, and thank you very much, Ricky, for that second support here, a $20 support. He said, I'm from New Jersey originally, and I figured you're from New Jersey or New York. He said, but now painting houses, painting houses in Texas. That's nice. I hope the business is going well. I hope it's going well. I'm sure there's plenty of brand new houses out there in Texas that need fresh coats of paint.
And Ricky, I gotta say, this is not the first time I've heard of someone from New Jersey becoming a house painter. I'm just playing, by the way, but I do thank you so much for your support. And it's really cool to hear, because I've actually heard that Texas is a really interesting place. Hopefully you're not close to the floods that are happening down near Killeen at the moment. I think those have generally subsided now, I think, but there's still a lot of people messing down there. It's been an unfortunate sort of a tragedy. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address it the best I can. And a huge thanks to you once again for supporting this channel and helping you to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Brian, who puts in a 5. And Brian said, update your computer.
And I thank you for the support, and one day I will. It's just that usually the displays keep up 24/7, so I generally don't update them because of that. But I will update them soon. But a big thanks to you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Gumby S, who puts in a 5, and also Plazoth, who put in a 3 as well. And thank you very much, Plazoth and Gumby, for that support, and we do appreciate that very much. We also have a 5 from Harry once again, who said, like and subscribe to this video on this channel.
Hey, and a big thanks to both of y'all for the support, and a big thanks for you shouting out the subscribe button. Please do, folks. Please do subscribe. We're getting very close to 475,000 subs, meaning we'll only be about 25,000 subs away from 500,000. So with that, a big thanks once again, and we're on to the next one.
We also have another $5 super chat from Harry, who said, I guess certain emojis are banned for super chats. I couldn't use it in the last chat. And I think some of them might be, actually. I think YouTube actually censors some of the super chats. I think. I'm not really sure, though. But I've heard that from the audience. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, it was like living in North Korea. Nothing gets close to living in North Korea, by the way. It's something that can't even compare. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And I hate to hear that, because YouTube is starting to censor a good bit in super chats these days. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Jack Ragnarsson, who puts in a 5. And they said, a random question, if you had to be stuck in either Stalin's USSR, Mao's China, North Korea, or Cambodia during Pol Pot, which would you choose and why? Honestly, I would choose, probably choose North Korea, to be honest with you, or Stalin's USSR. I wouldn't want to be in Mao's China. That's not a place to be. I wouldn't want to be in Cambodia with Pol Pot for sure. Wouldn't want to be there. Stalin's USSR would probably actually be my top pick. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say Stalin's USSR. I would not want to be in Mao's China, because you got a statistically high chance of dying from starvation. I would not want to be in North Korea, because statistically you have a high chance of being put into a political prison camp, which about 40% of the population's near to being in a camp like that, or they're in a camp like that. And I certainly wouldn't want to be in Pol Pot, because you're literally betting 1 in 4 chance that you're just going to get shot one day out of the blue and killed. So I would say that Stalin's USSR actually might be the easiest one to make it through, because all you have to do is just continuously profess loyalty to Stalin, and you generally should be safe. The famine in China hit everyone, regardless of who you were. There was no way to avoid it for the large part, unless you were Mao himself or his inner circle. With Pol Pot, it was literally a game of chance every day as to whether you're going to get shot or not. And in North Korea, considering that the large majority of the population is pretty much in a gulag, you are running a high chance of being in a gulag. So Stalin's USSR, crazily enough, probably would be the easiest one to survive out of those four. But with that, I thank you for the support. Very cool question, by the way. That was actually a really very like thought-provoking one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ravencross, who puts in a 5. Excuse me. They said, I love the content. I normally listen in the mornings on the way to work, and today is my daughter's first birthday, and I would love a shout out for Avery Rose.
And a big shout out to Avery Rose's first birthday. I gotta say, it's a great thing to hit a first birthday. I don't remember mine. I have a photographic memory. I don't remember what my first birthday was like, but I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep running. This is great to know that folks like you make this thing possible, and that we're able to hear that a new member of the LSA has turned 1 year old. And so with that, 1 year old, not 1 years old, that would be incorrect English. But still, a big thanks to you once again. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figman, and they said, LSA hit the like button. That's an order.
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. That is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figman. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from SD Enso Group Unit 46. She said, you are legends.
Hey, and you are a legend for being here on this channel and supporting it. And a massive thanks to you once again. And we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Chef Death, who said, best way to start the news every day, the Enforcer's news, and cheers.
Hey, and thank you for the support, and thank you for starting your day with Enforcer News. And a big thanks to you once again, and we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Mojo and the Rising. They said, could it be the UN, let's see here, once Ukraine plus Russia militarized, NK2 avoid nuke?
I'm actually reading that one on the spreadsheet. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one because I can't really read shorthand. But I do thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep running. And we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Plutonium Fever, who said USA.
And USA! Long live the Republic. And thank you for the support. And we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Shadow Raven, who said anything about Russia greenlighting nukes on Ukraine.
We haven't heard anything about that, and I would highly doubt that that would really ever happen, at least in the current situation we see. So, a big thanks for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, folks, it is time for us to get on into the live chat questions. Considering that we're almost over time tonight, we're going to be getting the Morse code decoders and a couple of live chats. It's going to be more than 3, probably somewhere around 5, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
And we have our Morse code decoders, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, and Aurora Fluffiness. They said the Morse code says, I'll be honest with you, the Russians are so goofy, they lost the MiG Factory in LOT LSA.
And on God, they goofy, but y'all got that down on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps for always getting that right time and time again. Y'all have gotten that correct for 1,234 days. You'll never see another day like that again. And I gotta congratulate y'all because y'all are always making sure to be on your P's and Q's and to get those Morse codes when they come in and have them accurate every single time. And so, a big thanks to you so much for that once again. And with that, it's time for us to get on into the live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Canada's Sovereign, who said, is Putin still holed up in a bunker?
For what we know, Bunker Boy is still in the bunker somewhere in Moscow, from what we know. So I think the answer to that would be yes. So I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to none other than Judy from the live chat, who said, what is the chance that there will be U.S. troops on the ground in Iran?
I don't know. I'd say the chances are low right now, but considering the unpredictability of the current administration, which makes U.S. The foreign policy analysis next to impossible sometimes, I would say that the chances could be anywhere in between 100% and 0%, but we wouldn't be able to give you a correct read on that because there's no way to know what they're doing. I hate to say that because we always like to give proper analysis, but it's true. I hope people understand. We're not fibbing with this. It's literally impossible to know what the current administration is doing on a day-to-day basis. The last administration, ran nearly on autopilot. It was pretty easy to know what they were going to do. Current administration literally can go from one thing to the next on a given week. So it's really hard to say what would be happening in months or years from now. We could go into Iran and just straight up invade them, or we might just let them blow up the Israelis. It could be anything in between, and I couldn't really tell you which one it would be. So I hope that addresses that somewhat well, at least the best I I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Scuba Side. You said, is there any military that is truly a threat to the U.S. in the USA aside from ICBMs?
Let's see. What? Reread that one again.
It says, is there any military that is truly a threat to the U.S. inside the USA or in the USA aside from ICBMs?
Not really. At least on a conventional level, if we're fighting on a home front like the United States, the U.S. military should be able to deal with really just about any issue if it made it onto the U.S. mainland. And that's not even including the armed citizenry, which would never be levied, but could also end up, conducting partisan attacks behind the lines on logistics and things like that. So I would say if anyone ever made it onto the ground in the U.S., excluding nukes, it would not go well for them. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dalton, who said, what do you think the announcement is on Monday, the big announcement on Russia from the United States?
Matthew, what will you think it is? What will you think it is? I want to see if you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking.
I'm thinking 2 more weeks.
That's what I'm thinking.
I'm joking.
That's what I agree with you.
I think it's going to be an announcement of a presidential drawdown on the $3 billion that's left in the PDA for Ukraine. That's probably what it's going to be, most likely. It could also maybe be sanctions, but I kind of think it probably will not be sanctions because we're still talking to the Russians. So we're probably going to hold off on that, even though we probably should go ahead and do it. But it'll probably be a PDA. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would legitimately say it's probably going to be another 2 more weeks announcement. That's what I'm thinking. Like when you said that first, you might have been joking. I actually sincerely was agreeing with you. I think it's going to be another 2 more weeks announcement because if we know anything at this point, it's that when the day of reckoning is coming for the Russians, it comes and then it's just another 2 weeks. So I'm going with that again. If that happens, folks, people ought to be very displeased, because that is going to be the lamest cop out if that happens again. I hope Matthew's right and that it is an actual drawdown. But if it's not a drawdown and it's just him saying 2 more weeks again, I think that a lot of people ought to start looking at that and start realizing that there's something a little bit weird going on with that. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to you for the Muns, who says, do you think that these conflicts that started under the previous administration will finally be put to rest under the current administration? And no, it's not a matter of administration. It's a matter of we're on autopilot right now because the world leaders and the Axis powers, I like to call them, are on autopilot themselves. So we don't really have a say in when it ends. All we can do is we can simply respond to what they're doing because Putin has his own agenda, Xi has his own agenda, Iran has its agenda, and North Korea has its own. So we respond to what they do. Now, hopefully we get more proactive, though, and deal with it a little bit quicker. But Enforcer, what say you?
That would be my answer. There is no such thing as a great man ending a conflict. I didn't like that concept coming in. And day one, it's going to be over just because, oh, God bless our great leader. That's not happening. That's not how the world works. Now, you can, as a person, change the outcome of what's going to happen. If a war is not going to happen, it's just not going to happen. If a war happens, it happens. It's just going to happen. That's just how it works. But you can change the way the outcome turns out. It's kind of like how all of y'all out there, no matter how great you are, or how great you think you are, you don't really get to control a lot of what happens to you. You just kind of get to control how you react and what the outcome will be. If someone whips out a knife and tries to stab you while you're walking down the street one night, you kind of get the choice as to whether you're going to live or not through your next actions. That's really what someone actually gets to do as the president. It's a myth that they actually kind of control the world. We're going to end the war on day one. That's not how those sorts of deals work. So with that in mind, I don't think that there's going to be an end to the conflicts in the last administration and this current administration. Because the truth is that they were going on before then. The war in Ukraine's technically been going on since 2014, and I didn't see the current president fix that when he was president in 2016 to 2020. And I also didn't see him really fix the Iran situation. I didn't see him fix Taiwan either. So I think that all of those are going to be existent conflicts or heavily ramp up before this administration's over with, just because that's the way it's really going at this point. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And we've reached the end of tonight's stream, folks. folks. I got to thank y'all massively for watching tonight. We actually had a peak viewership tonight of 17.6 thousand people and a total viewership of 157,000 people before the stream ended. We thank you all so much once again for watching, and if you all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight. And as Wimpy used to always say, I'll gladly pay you on Tuesday for a hamburger today, but wait 2 more weeks and I'll tell you when I'm going to pay you. But anyways, we'll see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern on the next Nightly War News stream, and also midday tomorrow as well for a short war video if there is enough news to cover. And a huge shout out to the 160,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. And we appreciate every single one of you. And with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Go to